Deep within Central Europe's heartland lies a story that forever changed the course of medieval history. What happened in the sprawling Bohemian territories between 550 and 900 AD wasn't just another tribal migration. This was a complete civilization overhaul that would echo through centuries. Envision a land surrounded by natural fortresses, towering Sudanine peaks guarding the north and west, the rolling Bohemian Moravian uplands standing sentinel to the southeast, and dense Bohemian woodlands creating an impenetrable barrier southwestward. This protected realm, cradled within mountain walls, became the stage for one of Europe's most dramatic population shifts during the turbulent 6th and 7th centuries. For generations, Germanic warriors had claimed dominion over these fertile territories. The Marcomanni tribes first carved their settlements from the wilderness, followed by the formidable Lombards who expanded their influence throughout the region. These Germanic peoples established thriving communities alongside the meandering Elbe waterway and its countless tributaries, creating a network of villages that had endured for centuries. Yet the winds of change were already stirring across the European continent. The great population movements of late antiquity, those massive human waves that reshaped entire civilizations, were gathering momentum. What emerged from this chaos would fundamentally transform Central Europe's ethnic composition and political structure forever. The westward surge of Slavic populations into Bohemian lands formed part of an enormous demographic revolution. These migrating communities originated from their ancestral territories within the Pripyat marshlands, spanning across modern Belarus and Ukraine. Unlike sudden invasions or violent conquests, this movement unfolded as a gradual but unstoppable tide of humanity, seeking new homes and opportunities. Archaeological discoveries reveal that Slavic pioneers first ventured into Bohemian territory around 550 AD. These initial settlers carefully selected locations along river valleys, where rich soils promised abundant harvests. Their arrival marked the beginning of a cultural revolution that would completely alter the region's character. The material evidence left by these early inhabitants tells a fascinating story of cultural distinctiveness. Their craftsmen produced distinctive handmade ceramics, decorated with simple geometric patterns, a stark contrast to Germanic pottery styles found in deeper archaeological layers. Instead of Germanic building techniques, these newcomers constructed rectangular dwellings with sunken floors, utilizing iron farming implements that differed markedly from tools used by previous occupants. Rather than driving out Germanic populations through warfare, the demographic transition occurred remarkably peacefully. Many Germanic settlements were simply abandoned as their inhabitants chose to migrate southward toward Italy or joined the expanding Lombard Confederation, seeking new opportunities elsewhere. This gradual withdrawal created vacant territories perfect for Slavic colonization. The incoming Slavic communities organized themselves around extended family networks called Zerdruga. These kinship groups naturally gravitated toward areas that remained sparsely populated or had been recently vacated by departing Germanic families. Strategic thinking guided their settlement patterns as they established fortified strongholds, called grads, on elevated positions commanding river valleys. These defensive installations featured wooden palisades and earthwork fortifications designed to protect against raiders and competing tribal groups. The locations were carefully chosen to control strategic river crossings and emerging trade routes that would prove economically vital in coming decades. By the early 7th century, distinct tribal confederations had crystallized throughout the Bohemian Basin. The Czech people dominated central and western territories, constructing their principal strongholds along the vital Vltava waterway. Eastern regions fell under control of smaller tribal groups. The Lucane established themselves around present-day Luni, while the Slavnik Confederation settled territories that would eventually become Melnik. Each tribal entity maintained its own fortified administrative center, typically positioned on rocky outcroppings or artificial mounds that provided commanding views of strategic river crossings and developing commercial pathways. These elevated positions served dual purposes: military defense and economic control over regional trade networks. Political structures among these early Slavic tribes remained relatively straightforward compared to more complex Germanic or Byzantine systems. Authority concentrated in warrior chiefs who earned leadership through military achievements and their skill at distributing wealth among loyal followers. These leaders bore various titles including Jupan and Nez, ruling territories that rarely extended beyond a single day's march from their fortified headquarters. Tribal assemblies composed of free warriors made crucial decisions regarding warfare, significant disputes, and leadership succession. While established noble families gradually gained influence over time, the fundamental democratic character of early Slavic governance remained intact through these formative centuries. The first major political consolidation emerged under Samo's remarkable leadership between 623 and 658 AD. This Frankish merchant turned political leader created a vast confederation spanning much of Central Europe through his unique combination of commercial expertise and military acumen. Historical chronicles, particularly Fredegar's detailed accounts, describe how Samo gained Slavic trust through extensive trading activities before assuming leadership during their conflicts with the threatening Avar Khaganate. The Avar Confederation, a powerful nomadic empire based in the Pannonian Plains, had been extracting tribute from Slavic tribes while conducting devastating slave raids throughout the region since the late 6th century. Samo's unified response represented an unprecedented achievement in early medieval political organization, bringing together Slavic tribes across modern Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, and Slovenia under single authority. This confederation's military capabilities became legendary following their stunning victory over Frankish forces at Wogastisburg in 631 AD. King Dagobert Agir's major expedition met decisive defeat when Samo's warriors employed innovative tactics combining traditional Slavic infantry formations with cavalry units adapted from Avar military models. The battle's location remains historically disputed, with scholars proposing sites including Rubin Hill near Podbornieni in northwestern Bohemia and various Austrian locations. Archaeological evidence suggests massive engagement involving thousands of warriors, with Samo's forces utilizing superior terrain knowledge to overcome Frankish advantages in heavy cavalry and siege technology. This victory forced Frankish recognition of Samo's confederation as a legitimate political entity, while abandoning immediate eastward expansion plans. Following Samo's death around 658 AD, his confederation fragmented into constituent tribal territories, yet the precedent for supratribal political organization had been permanently established, setting the stage for future Bohemian state formation. Borivoja's ascension to power occurred during one of Central Europe's most turbulent periods, as Great Moravia reached unprecedented heights under Svatoplukar's ambitious expansion. This convergence created intricate political webs that would influence Bohemian destiny for countless generations to come. The momentous decision by Borivoje to embrace Christianity around 883 AD represented far more than personal religious conviction. It fundamentally altered Bohemia's trajectory through medieval history. Traditional accounts describe his baptism at the hands of Saint Methodius, the renowned Byzantine missionary who had successfully brought Christian faith to Great Moravian territories. This spiritual transformation carried enormous political ramifications, establishing crucial connections with the powerful Moravian court, while simultaneously creating friction with traditional pagan factions within his own tribal confederation. Archaeological investigations at Prague Castle, where Borivoje established his principal seat of authority, have uncovered remains of Bohemia's first Christian sanctuary during this transformative era. This modest rotunda, consecrated to the Virgin Mary, stood as a revolutionary symbol of the new faith taking root in Slavic soil. The strategic brilliance of Prague Castle's placement cannot be overstated. Inishad positioned majestically upon rocky cliffs, commanding the vital vault of a waterway. It granted Borivoje unprecedented control over essential commercial arteries, linking southern Germanic territories with Polish lands and distant Baltic shores. Merchants navigating these lucrative pathways transported precious amber, luxurious furs, human captives, and essential salt deposits, generating substantial customs income that dramatically enhanced Przemysl financial resources. The castle's defensive installations, beginning with wooden barriers and earthen ramparts, underwent continuous expansion to meet growing administrative requirements, while offering sanctuary to surrounding populations during military emergencies. Borivo's political consolidation demanded masterful combination of diplomatic negotiations and decisive military intervention against competing tribal chieftains. He skillfully forged partnerships with cooperative Czech nobility while systematically eliminating rivals who posed threats to his expanding authority. This delicate undertaking required exceptional balance between revolutionary changes and respected traditions, implementing innovative administrative methods borrowed from Moravian and Frankish precedents, while honoring established customs governing property ownership and tribal decision-making processes. His remarkable success in maintaining this equilibrium enabled the Pygmy-Slid lineage to survive Great Moravia's catastrophic collapse during the early 10th century, emerging as Bohemia's uncontested ruling force. The systematic unification of Bohemian tribal groups under Pygmy-Slid governance accelerated dramatically throughout the reigns of Borivoja's immediate successors. Zbyněk, Borivo's capable son, energetically continued the consolidation campaign, extending Pygmy-Slid dominion over previously autonomous tribal territories through shrewd combinations of military campaigns, strategic marriage arrangements, and attractive economic inducements. Archaeological findings indicate widespread abandonment of tribal fortifications during this period as populations voluntarily relocated to settlements under direct Pygmy-Slid supervision. Integrating such diverse tribal communities demanded sophisticated administrative innovations that transformed Bohemian governance. The Pygmy-Slids established an extensive network of fortified administrative centers known as hradiště, each governed by appointed officials responsible for tribute collection, public order maintenance, and military recruitment coordination. These installations became magnets for economic activity, drawing skilled craftsmen and enterprising merchants who prospered under the security provided by Pygmy-Slid protection. The resulting population concentration and resource consolidation enabled far more efficient taxation systems and military organization than the fragmented tribal structure had ever achieved. Religious policies proved instrumental in the unification process, though they required careful navigation of competing spiritual loyalties. While Pygmy-Slid rulers had adopted Christianity, many subjects remained deeply committed to ancestral Slavic religious traditions. Rather than pursuing aggressive forced conversions that might provoke rebellion, early Pygmy-Slid monarchs implemented pragmatic policies that tolerated pagan practices while gradually introducing Christian institutions throughout their territories. Churches rose at major administrative centers, yet sacred pagan locations were often incorporated into Christian contexts rather than suffering outright destruction. Economic foundations supporting Pygmy-Slid authority encompassed agriculture, commerce, and specialized craft production across diverse sectors. The exceptionally fertile Bohemian basin sustained extensive grain cultivation that fed growing populations, while vast forested regions supplied valuable timber, sweet honey, and abundant game. Rich iron ore deposits within the Bohemian Moravian highlands fostered metallurgical development, producing superior weapons, essential tools, and decorative objects that enhanced both military capabilities and diplomatic prestige throughout the region. Silver extraction commenced during this era, though large-scale mining operations would not achieve full development until subsequent centuries brought technological advances. Commercial relationships stretched throughout Central Europe and extended to distant markets beyond traditional boundaries. Bohemian merchants journeyed to prosperous Byzantine trading posts via Danube River routes, while others ventured northward to Baltic coastal markets or westward into Frankish commercial territories. These extensive commercial networks brought exotic foreign merchandise, innovative ideas, and advanced technologies into Bohemia, while simultaneously providing profitable markets for locally produced goods. The Pygmy-Slids carefully regulated and taxed this flourishing trade, utilizing substantial customs revenues to fund their expanding administrative apparatus and maintain increasingly professional military forces. Zbyněk's death around 915 AD elevated his younger brother Václav to the Pygmy-Slid throne, precisely when Bohemia confronted unprecedented threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Magyar raiding parties swept across Pannonian territories with alarming frequency, their devastating mounted archer formations penetrating deeply into Bohemian heartland territories to capture valuable prisoners and seize livestock. Concurrently, ambitious Saxon dukes of the emerging Ottonian dynasty pressed aggressively eastward from their Elbe River strongholds, determined to extend Frankish political influence over Slavic tribal confederations that had previously acknowledged Moravian sovereignty. Within Bohemia itself, powerful noble factions openly questioned whether the inexperienced young duke possessed adequate military expertise to defend their ancestral territories against such formidable external adversaries. Václav confronted these multifaceted challenges through strategic approaches emphasizing diplomatic solutions rather than military confrontations. Instead of adopting the aggressive postures favored by neighboring rulers, he pursued calculated accommodation policies with superior military powers, while simultaneously strengthening internal unity through comprehensive religious and administrative reforms. His court at Prague Castle evolved into a distinguished center of Christian scholarship, where traditional Slavonic liturgical practices coexisted harmoniously with established Latin traditions, reflecting his careful attempts to balance Byzantine and Roman influences within Bohemian Christianity. Learned scholars educated in great Moravian academic institutions continued their intellectual work under generous Premyslid patronage, creating beautiful illuminated manuscripts and maintaining extensive libraries that preserved both sacred religious texts and valuable secular knowledge for future generations. The Duke's sincere commitment to Christian principles profoundly influenced his governmental approaches in ways that occasionally conflicted with traditional noble expectations regarding warrior leadership. He established charitable hospices for weary travelers and impoverished citizens, funded church construction projects in remote rural communities, and attempted to regulate the profitable slave trade that had become a major revenue source for Bohemian military elites. These progressive policies reflected genuine religious convictions while simultaneously serving practical political purposes by demonstrating his alignment with Christian monarchs throughout Europe and attracting valuable support from influential ecclesiastical authorities capable of providing crucial diplomatic assistance. Dawn broke over Prague on September 28th, casting long shadows across the ancient stones as Václav made his customary journey toward morning worship. What unfolded in those crucial moments would forever alter Bohemian history and create one of Central Europe's most enduring legends. As the devout Duke approached the sacred threshold, Boleslav emerged from concealment near the church entrance, his face twisted with determination and bitter resentment. The confrontation erupted with terrifying swiftness. Mor's harsh words escalated into deadly violence, as Boleslav unsheathed his blade, striking his unsuspecting brother down upon the very steps leading to God's sanctuary. Loyal conspirators rushed forward to join the brutal assault, ensuring Václav's death before he could reach the protective sanctuary of holy ground. The assassination's immediate consequences exposed the conspiracy's sophisticated planning and extensive preparation. Boleslav had methodically secured allegiances from influential nobles and seasoned military commanders throughout preceding months, positioning himself to seize Prague Castle and other crucial strongholds without encountering meaningful opposition. Yet the horrific murder of a Christian monarch at a church entrance generated profound religious and political repercussions that would torment Boleslav's reign for decades. Almost immediately following Václav's burial, extraordinary reports began circulating throughout Bohemian territories. Desperate pilgrims claimed miraculous healings occurred when they offered prayers at his graveside, while others testified to supernatural interventions following appeals for the slain duke's intercession. The remarkable transformation from failed political leader to venerated martyr unfolded with astonishing rapidity, propelled by both spontaneous popular devotion and calculated political manipulation by various factions. Initially, Boleslav attempted aggressive suppression of his brother's growing religious cult, recognizing the dangerous political implications of Václav's posthumous sanctification. However, determined opposition from ecclesiastical authorities combined with mounting pressure from neighboring Christian monarchs ultimately forced him to accommodate the unstoppable veneration of his murdered sibling. By 935 AD, Václav's mortal remains had been ceremoniously transferred to Prague's magnificent church of St. Vitus, where they were enshrined within an elaborate tomb that quickly became Central Europe's most significant pilgrimage destination. This religious development provided Bohemia with its first indigenous saint, while establishing spiritual foundations for Prinimis-led legitimacy that transcended temporary political divisions and factional conflicts. Boleslav's consolidation required immediate attention to escalating external threats that had intensified during the succession crisis and political instability. Saxon armies under the formidable Henry the Fowler had skillfully exploited Bohemian weakness to establish threatening fortified positions along northern frontier regions, while Magyar raiding parties dramatically increased their devastating penetration into previously secure Bohemian heartland territories. The new duke's military response demonstrated the exceptional combat competence that had initially attracted noble support for his violent coup. He systematically reorganized Bohemian armed forces around heavily armored cavalry formations, directly modeled on proven Frankish military examples, while carefully maintaining traditional Slavic infantry units equipped with lengthy spears, battle axes, and distinctive round shields decorated with intricate geometric patterns reflecting ancient cultural traditions. The decisive confrontation with Saxon territorial expansion reached its climax during 936 AD, when Otto Wur, who had inherited his father Henry's ambitious expansionist policies, launched a massive military expedition deep into Bohemian territory. Otto's formidable coalition included not only experienced Saxon veterans, but also substantial contingents from Franconia and Bavaria, representing the emerging alliance that would eventually constitute the Holy Roman Empire's military core. This comprehensive campaign aimed to compel complete Bohemian submission to Saxon overlordship, while simultaneously demonstrating Otto's capability to project overwhelming military power far beyond traditional Frankish territorial boundaries. Boleslav's strategic response revealed his sophisticated understanding of contemporary military tactics and complex political dynamics governing Central European warfare. Rather than risking catastrophic defeat by confronting the superior Saxon army in conventional open battle, where their overwhelming heavy cavalry advantages would prove decisive, he adopted an innovative defensive strategy that maximized Bohemia's exceptional natural geographic advantages. Bohemian forces executed strategic withdrawals to carefully prepared, fortified positions within mountainous terrain, compelling the invading Saxons to assault well-defended strongholds, while operating dangerously far from their essential supply bases. Simultaneously, Boleslav conducted secret negotiations with Magyar chieftains, offering them uncontested passage through selected Bohemian territories in exchange for coordinated raids against vulnerable Saxon positions and supply lines. This brilliant diplomatic maneuver demonstrated his ability to transform potential enemies into temporary allies against common adversaries. The resulting military campaign proved strategically inconclusive from purely tactical perspectives, yet established crucial precedents for future Bohemian-Saxon diplomatic relations that would influence Central European politics for generations. Otto's professional forces successfully captured several fortified installations and extracted substantial tribute from territories under their temporary military control, but they failed to achieve the comprehensive conquest necessary for establishing permanent Saxon administrative authority throughout Bohemian lands. Boleslav retained firm control over Prague and other major regional strongholds, while convincingly demonstrating his regime's capacity to resist overwhelming external pressure through intelligent strategic planning. The campaign's conclusion through negotiated diplomatic settlement, rather than decisive military victory, created frameworks for ongoing political engagement between these competing powers. The historic agreement concluded between Otto and Boleslav during 937 AD established Bohemia's position within the expanding Ottonian sphere of political influence, while preserving significant internal autonomy that protected essential Bohemian interests. Boleslav formally acknowledged Saxon suzerainty and committed to providing military assistance for Otto's future campaigns, but he retained complete control over crucial internal Bohemian affairs, including taxation systems, legal administration, and ecclesiastical appointments. This pragmatic arrangement reflected Otto's realistic recognition that direct Saxon rule over Bohemian territories would require enormous military resources better deployed in other strategic theatres, while simultaneously providing Boleslav with external legitimacy that significantly strengthened his political position against persistent domestic opponents and rival claimants. Bohemia's integration into Otto's expanding imperial system accelerated dramatically following his momentous coronation as Holy Roman Emperor during 962 AD. Boleslav participated enthusiastically in several of Otto's ambitious Italian campaigns, commanding Bohemian military contingents that demonstrated exceptional effectiveness across diverse geographic environments and tactical situations. These extensive expeditions provided Bohemian warriors with invaluable combat experience against varied opponents, while exposing them to revolutionary military technologies and advanced organizational methods. The campaigns also generated enormous quantities of valuable booty that Boleslav systematically distributed among his devoted followers, reinforcing their unwavering loyalty while funding continuous military improvements and technological upgrades. Bohemian participation in imperial military campaigns created unprecedented opportunities for territorial expansion that Boleslav exploited with remarkable strategic skill. During Otto's prolonged absence conducting Italian operations, Magyar pressure against the empire's vulnerable eastern frontiers intensified dramatically, culminating in their catastrophic defeat at the legendary Battle of Lechfeld during 955 AD. The complete Magyar military collapse created an enormous power vacuum throughout the Pannonian Basin that neighboring rulers desperately rushed to fill before competitors could establish permanent control. Boleslav moved with lightning speed to establish firm Bohemian authority over extensive territories encompassing present-day Slovakia and substantial portions of Hungary, extending Přemyslid political influence far beyond any traditional boundaries. This aggressive eastward expansion inevitably brought Bohemia into direct military conflict with Poland, where the ambitious Piast dynasty under Mieszko I was pursuing identical territorial objectives and expansion strategies. Both rulers sought comprehensive control over the enormously lucrative trade routes, connecting Baltic coastal markets with Danubian commercial centers, while simultaneously attempting to subjugate independent Slavic tribal confederations that had previously maintained precarious autonomy between competing regional powers. The sophisticated governmental machinery established under Boleslav's rule required revolutionary administrative innovations to manage territories that now stretched far beyond ancestral Bohemian boundaries. Regional administrators throughout the expanded realm implemented standardized procedures for tax collection, public order maintenance, and military recruitment, ensuring consistent application of ducal policies across culturally diverse populations and geographical regions. The construction of an extensive castle network provided essential physical infrastructure for effective territorial governance and military defense. Major fortifications rose at strategically crucial locations, including river confluences where multiple waterways converged, mountain passes controlling access routes, and vital trade route intersections that generated substantial commercial revenues. These imposing installations served multiple interconnected functions as formidable military strongholds, efficient administrative headquarters, and thriving economic centers where local populations could seek sanctuary during periods of armed conflict. The most elaborate castle complexes featured separate residential quarters designed for noble families and their extensive retinues, specialized workshops where skilled craftsmen produced everything from weapons to luxury goods, massive storage facilities capable of preserving agricultural surplus through harsh winters, and beautiful chapels providing regular religious services for garrison troops and civilian inhabitants. This comprehensive approach to fortress construction reflected sophisticated understanding of medieval governance requirements and military necessities. Boleslav's death around 967 AD elevated his ambitious son Boleslav II to ducal authority during an era marked by continued territorial expansion and intensive internal consolidation efforts. The younger ruler inherited a realm extending dramatically beyond original Bohemian tribal territories, while confronting persistent challenges from aggressive Polish expansion and gradual Hungarian recovery from their devastating Lechfeld defeat. His early reign concentrated on securing vulnerable eastern frontiers against determined Polish encroachment, while maintaining the precarious balance between imperial obligations and precious Bohemian autonomy that his father had skillfully negotiated through decades of careful diplomacy. Boleslav II demonstrated even more audacious territorial ambitions than his accomplished predecessor, launching extensive military campaigns that pushed Bohemian control deep into present-day Slovakia and substantial portions of southern Poland. His experienced forces captured the vital commercial center of Kraków around 999 AD, establishing firm Bohemian authority over one of Central Europe's most economically significant urban centers. This spectacular conquest provided unprecedented access to extensive trade networks connecting Baltic coastal markets with prosperous Black Sea commercial hubs, while dramatically demonstrating Bohemian military superiority over Polish armed forces. Archaeological investigations throughout Kraków reveal ambitious construction projects undertaken during Bohemian occupation, including comprehensive fortification improvements and the establishment of permanent administrative buildings designed to cement long-term political control. The dramatic expansion of Bohemian territorial authority created unprecedented opportunities for economic development and beneficial cultural exchange between different populations. Trade revenues increased substantially as enterprising Bohemian merchants gained valuable access to previously restricted foreign markets, while the incorporation of diverse ethnic groups introduced innovative crafts techniques and advanced technologies that enhanced overall kingdom productivity. Silver mining operations expanded dramatically during this prosperous period, with new extraction sites developed throughout mountainous regions now under secure Bohemian control. The increased availability of precious silver enabled implementation of more sophisticated monetary systems throughout the realm, while providing essential resources for continued military expansion and ambitious architectural projects that enhanced ducal prestige. Religious policies during both Boleslav rulers' reigns reflected the complex relationship between aggressive political expansion and gradual Christian conversion throughout newly conquered territories. The establishment of effective Bohemian control over diverse populations required extremely careful attention to existing religious practices and established ecclesiastical structures that commanded local loyalty. In regions with well-established Christian communities, Bohemian administrators generally maintained existing church organizational structures while ensuring their complete loyalty to Prague's ecclesiastical authority. Pagan populations received encouragement rather than coercion regarding conversion to Christianity, with religious transformation typically following the establishment of new churches and the arrival of dedicated missionary clergy who respected local customs while introducing Christian doctrine. The momentous foundation of Prague's bishopric in 973 AD represented the culmination of decades of steady ecclesiastical development throughout Bohemian territories under enlightened Przemyslid patronage. Emperor Otto VI's formal approval of this new diocese reflected both Bohemia's enhanced political importance within the imperial system and the impressive maturation of Christian institutions under sustained ducal support. The first bishop, Thietmar, had received his education in prestigious German schools, but demonstrated remarkable sensitivity to local traditions by maintaining beloved Slavonic liturgical practices alongside mandatory Latin ceremonies. This balanced approach helped ease potential tensions between traditional religious customs and new ecclesiastical requirements. The establishment of independent episcopal authority provided Bohemia with significantly greater ecclesiastical autonomy, while simultaneously strengthening valuable ties to the broader European Christian community that offered important political and cultural benefits. The new bishopric's jurisdiction extended throughout all Bohemian territories, including recently conquered regions where Christian institutions remained seriously underdeveloped due to previous neglect. Bishop Thietmar immediately initiated an ambitious program encompassing extensive church construction and comprehensive clerical education designed to provide adequate religious services for the rapidly expanding population, now under Bohemian rule. Rural parishes were systematically established in remote areas that had previously lacked regular access to essential Christian sacraments, while growing urban centers received magnificent new churches capable of accommodating increasingly large congregations drawn from diverse backgrounds. The bishop also founded specialized schools dedicated to training local clergy, dramatically reducing dangerous dependence on foreign-educated priests, while ensuring adequate knowledge of both complex theological doctrine and practical administrative procedures necessary for effective parish management. The comprehensive ecclesiastical reorganization initiated by Bishop Thietmar established the crucial institutional framework that would support Bohemia's remarkable transformation from a peripheral duchy into one of Central Europe's most influential medieval kingdoms. Boleslav VI's death around 999 AD coincided with broader political upheavals throughout the region. As the Ottonian imperial system confronted serious challenges from resurgent Polish power under the formidable Boleslaw the Brave and aggressive Hungarian expansion under the capable Stephen I. These mounting external pressures combined with destabilizing internal succession disputes within the Przemyslid dynasty created an extended period of dangerous instability that would ultimately reshape Bohemian political structures and territorial boundaries. The succession crisis following Boleslav's unexpected death exposed fundamental weaknesses in the Przemyslid governmental system that had developed over previous decades. Unlike the clearly defined primogeniture practices that characterized several Western European dynasties, Bohemian succession traditions retained significant elements of ancient tribal customs where multiple family members could legitimately claim royal authority based on blood relations and political support. Boleslav III, who initially secured control of strategic Prague Castle through swift military action, faced immediate challenges from his ambitious brothers Jaromir and Oldrich, each commanding substantial territorial bases and maintaining loyal military followings throughout different regions. The resulting devastating civil war fragmented previously unified Bohemian territories precisely when external enemies prepared to exploit the kingdom's internal divisions for their own territorial advantage. Polish forces under the aggressive Bolesław the Brave moved with lightning speed to reclaim valuable territories lost during previous decades of sustained Bohemian expansion. The successful recapture of Kraków in 1003 AD completely eliminated hard-won Bohemian influence throughout southern Poland, while providing Poland with crucial trade revenues previously controlled by Prague's commercial networks. Bolesław's ambitious campaigns extended far beyond mere territorial recovery to encompass a systematic effort to establish comprehensive Polish hegemony over all Slavic lands stretching between the Oder and Danube rivers. His professional forces captured Prague itself during 1003, forcing Boleslaw III into humiliating exile and installing Vladivo, a member of the collateral Przemyslid lineage, as a compliant Polish client ruler. Though the Polish occupation of Bohemia lasted only until 1004, its brief duration concealed profound impacts on subsequent Bohemian political development that would influence governance for generations. The comprehensive restoration of ecclesiastical authority demanded exceptional attention throughout war-torn territories, as countless churches had suffered devastating damage during prolonged military campaigns, while terrified clerical personnel had abandoned their posts seeking safety in distant regions. Bishop Thietmar of Prague collaborated intensively with ducal authorities to re-establish disrupted parish networks and restore monastic communities that warfare had scattered across the countryside. New religious structures rose from the ashes to replace sanctuaries destroyed during bitter conflicts, often incorporating revolutionary architectural innovations that reflected dramatically increased contact with sophisticated German building traditions and construction techniques. Master builders trained in imperial workshops brought advanced engineering knowledge that transformed Bohemian ecclesiastical architecture forever. The remarkable economic recovery characterizing Jaromir's reign benefited enormously from renewed access to international commercial networks that political upheavals had severely disrupted throughout the previous decade. Enterprising Bohemian merchants systematically re-established profitable commercial relationships with trading partners throughout Bavaria, Austria, and northern Italy, while simultaneously developing entirely new business connections with emerging commercial centers flourishing along the Baltic coastline. This comprehensive restoration of trade relationships generated substantial customs revenues that funded essential military reconstruction and administrative expansion programs, enabling the gradual restoration of effective Bohemian authority over valuable territories lost during the catastrophic succession crisis that had nearly destroyed the kingdom. Military reforms implemented during this crucial reconstruction period reflected hard-learned lessons from recent devastating defeats and the urgent necessity to compete effectively with increasingly sophisticated neighboring armies, employing advanced tactics and superior equipment. Jaromir systematically expanded the heavy cavalry formations that had demonstrated exceptional effectiveness in earlier successful campaigns, while simultaneously introducing innovative infantry tactics borrowed directly from imperial military manuals developed by experienced Germanic commanders. The construction of new fortifications throughout the realm incorporated the latest revolutionary developments in castle design and defensive architecture, including dramatically improved gate systems featuring multiple layers of protection, enhanced living quarters specifically designed for garrison forces, and specialized storage facilities capable of maintaining military equipment in optimal condition through extended sieges. These comprehensive improvements enabled far more effective territorial control while providing secure operational bases for future expansion campaigns that would restore Bohemian influence throughout Central Europe. Oldish's brief but transformative reign from 1012 to 1033 marked a decisive strategic shift toward internal consolidation that would characterize the mature Přemyslid period. Unlike his ambitious predecessors who had focused primarily on aggressive territorial expansion through military conquest, Oldish concentrated his considerable energies on strengthening central ducal authority within well-established Bohemian boundaries. His comprehensive administrative reforms established more direct ducal control over powerful regional nobles, while systematically reducing the extensive autonomy that local strongmen had traditionally enjoyed since the earliest tribal periods. These fundamental changes generated significant resistance from established noble elites who viewed them as threats to ancestral privileges, yet they created the essential governmental foundations necessary for sustained economic growth and long-term territorial stability. Oldish's sophisticated domestic policies reflected his profound understanding of the crucial relationship between systematic economic development and effective political authority. He established numerous new market towns at strategically selected locations throughout Bohemian territories, providing comprehensive legal protections and attractive tax incentives that successfully attracted skilled merchants and experienced craftsmen from throughout Central Europe. These thriving urban centers served as dynamic focal points for expanding regional economic activity, while generating substantial revenues that reduced ducal dependence on traditional tribute payments, extracted from rural agricultural populations. The dramatic growth of urban commercial activity also created entirely new social groups whose prosperity depended fundamentally on continued political stability, providing the Duke with reliable support against persistent noble opposition to governmental reforms. The reign of Bětislav I from 1034 to 1055 represented the magnificent culmination of early 11th century Bohemian development, while establishing the crucial institutional foundations for the kingdom's subsequent golden age of prosperity and influence. Bětislav's early military campaigns demonstrated dramatically renewed Bohemian military capabilities, while his later comprehensive domestic reforms created the sophisticated institutional structures that would support sustained territorial expansion and unprecedented economic growth for generations. His audacious invasion of Poland during 1039 successfully reclaimed valuable territories lost during the previous generation's disasters, while extending Bohemian influence into entirely new regions that had never previously acknowledged Přemyslid authority or paid tribute to Prague. The Polish campaign of 1039 to 1040 revealed the extraordinary extent of Bohemian military recovery since the catastrophic disasters of the early 11th century that had nearly destroyed the kingdom. Bětislav's professional forces systematically captured major Polish strongholds, including the vital centers of Poznań and Gniezno, while his highly mobile cavalry units penetrated deeply into Polish heartland territories to conduct devastating systematic raids against enemy agricultural resources and commercial infrastructure. The campaign's spectacular success demonstrated highly effective coordination between different specialized military units and sophisticated logistical planning capabilities that enabled sustained offensive operations far from Bohemian territorial bases. Archaeological evidence from captured Polish fortifications reveals extensive damage from prolonged siege operations, clearly indicating the development of advanced military engineering capabilities that rivaled those of imperial armies. The most dramatically significant achievement of the entire Polish campaign was the spectacular capture of Gniezno, Poland's ecclesiastical capital, where Byatislav's victorious forces seized the precious remains of Saint Adalbert, along with numerous other sacred relics that had become powerful symbols of Polish Christian identity and national pride. The ceremonious translation of these holy relics to Prague represented both a tremendous religious triumph and a bold political statement regarding Bohemian claims to spiritual leadership among all Slavic Christian peoples throughout Central Europe. The arrival of Saint Adalbert's sacred remains in Prague was celebrated with elaborate public ceremonies that emphasized exceptional Bohemian piety while dramatically demonstrating the kingdom's rapidly growing ecclesiastical importance throughout the Christian world. Emperor Henry III's decisive military intervention during 1041 ultimately forced Byatisław to abandon his extensive Polish conquests, yet the campaign's remarkable success had already achieved its primary strategic objectives of convincingly demonstrating formidable Bohemian military capabilities, while securing valuable territorial concessions that strengthened the kingdom's position. The comprehensive peace settlement negotiated at Regensburg established new territorial boundaries that incorporated significant territorial gains while providing reasonable compensation for abandoned claims in other disputed regions. These crucial agreements also formally confirmed Bohemian autonomy regarding internal affairs, while establishing clear obligations for imperial military service that would characterize subsequent imperial Bohemian diplomatic relations. The revolutionary domestic reforms implemented during Byatyslav's later reign created the essential administrative and legal foundations that would support Bohemia's remarkable transformation into a major European power capable of competing with established kingdoms. The Statutes of Byatyslav, promulgated around 1039, established comprehensive legal codes that systematically regulated marriage practices, inheritance procedures, and commercial relationships according to Christian principles, while carefully incorporating respected traditional Slavic customs. These groundbreaking laws provided crucial legal uniformity throughout all Bohemian territories, while establishing clear, standardized procedures for resolving disputes that had previously generated dangerous conflicts between different regional traditions and local customs. The sophisticated ecclesiastical provisions within Byatyslav's legislation demonstrated his profound understanding of the vital relationship between religious authority and effective political control. The statutes mandated regular church attendance for all citizens, carefully regulated clerical behavior and responsibilities, and established systematic procedures for founding new parishes that ensured adequate religious services for rapidly expanding populations throughout the realm. These comprehensive requirements significantly strengthened Christian institutions while providing the Duke with additional effective mechanisms for monitoring and controlling local communities that might otherwise develop separatist tendencies. Zbigniew the Bitchin's succession in 1055 initiated an extended period of continued internal development, punctuated by renewed territorial expansion efforts and increasing integration with broader European political networks. Zbignew's reign convincingly demonstrated the remarkable effectiveness of his father's institutional reforms, while simultaneously revealing new challenges posed by rapidly changing international circumstances that demanded innovative responses. The growing military power of Hungary under Andrew in Bela and created serious competitive pressures along Bohemia's vulnerable southern frontiers, while imperial political changes under Henry IV generated unprecedented opportunities for increased Bohemian autonomy within the traditional imperial system that had previously constrained ducal independence. Military confrontations between Bohemian and Hungarian armies revealed the dramatic evolution of Central European warfare from its primitive early medieval origins into sophisticated combined operations that would define 13th century conflicts. Both kingdoms deployed advanced tactical systems, integrating heavily armored cavalry formations, disciplined infantry units, and specialized siege detachments capable of systematically reducing even the most formidable fortified positions through advanced engineering techniques. The revolutionary development of castle siege methodologies required extensive engineering expertise and specialized equipment that transformed medieval warfare forever. This technological revolution led to active recruitment of foreign military specialists and the establishment of sophisticated workshops capable of producing complex siege machinery, including massive trebuchets, portable rams, and innovative scaling devices that could breach previously impregnable defenses. Spitiniev's unexpected death in 1061 elevated his ambitious brother Vratislav II to supreme authority during an unprecedented period of opportunity for dramatic Bohemian territorial and political advancement throughout Central Europe. The severe imperial crisis triggered by Henry IV's bitter conflicts with Pope Gregory VII created extraordinary circumstances that enabled ambitious regional rulers to expand their territorial authority while extracting valuable concessions from an increasingly embattled emperor struggling to maintain imperial unity. Vratislav exploited these remarkable opportunities with exceptional diplomatic skill, providing crucial military support to Henry during the devastating investiture controversy, while simultaneously securing recognition of dramatically enhanced Bohemian status within the traditional imperial hierarchy that had previously limited ducal autonomy. Vratislav's active participation in Henry's ambitious Italian campaigns convincingly demonstrated formidable Bohemian military capabilities on the prestigious European stage while generating substantial political and economic benefits that transformed the kingdom's international position. Bohemian forces played decisive roles in numerous major battles, including the legendary Siege of Rome during 1084, where their advanced engineering expertise proved absolutely crucial in breaching the ancient city's massive fortifications that had withstood countless previous assaults. The spectacular success of these prolonged campaigns provided Vratislav with enormous quantities of valuable booty that he systematically distributed among his devoted followers, while simultaneously establishing his formidable reputation as one of the empire's most reliable and effective military commanders. The magnificent culmination of Vratislav's distinguished imperial service occurred during 1085, when Emperor Henry IV formally elevated him to royal status, making him the first king of Bohemia and establishing the crucial precedent for Bohemian royal dignity that would characterize subsequent centuries of political development. The elaborate coronation ceremony held at Mainz Cathedral represented a genuine watershed moment in Central European political evolution, officially recognizing Bohemia's remarkable transformation from a peripheral duchy into a major European kingdom capable of competing with established powers. The magnificent royal crown, crafted by imperial goldsmiths, according to contemporary Byzantine and Western artistic models, incorporated precious gemstones and sacred religious symbols that emphasized both temporal authority and legitimate Christian kingship, recognized throughout medieval Europe. The profound transformation from duchy to kingdom involved far more than mere ceremonial recognition, requiring substantial administrative and institutional changes that reflected Bohemia's dramatically enhanced political status within the medieval hierarchy. Vratislav established an elaborate royal court that successfully rivaled those of other European monarchs, attracting distinguished scholars, talented artists, and experienced administrators from throughout the continent, seeking opportunities under royal patronage. The court's extensive cultural activities included generous patronage of manuscript, illumination, ambitious architectural projects, and sophisticated musical composition that significantly enhanced Bohemia's reputation as a distinguished center of Christian learning and artistic achievement throughout medieval Europe. The essential economic foundations supporting royal authority required systematic development of natural resources that could adequately support the expanded governmental apparatus and extensive military obligations inevitably associated with royal status. Vratislav initiated massive expansion of silver mining operations throughout the Bohemian mountains, employing revolutionary extraction techniques borrowed from experienced German mining specialists, while carefully maintaining complete Bohemian control over production and profitable distribution networks. The dramatically increased availability of precious silver enabled implementation of more sophisticated monetary systems throughout the kingdom, while simultaneously providing essential resources for ambitious architectural projects and superior military equipment that properly befitted royal dignity and international prestige. The remarkable development of Prague as a major Central European commercial center accelerated exponentially during Vratislav's transformative reign, systematically transforming the city from a regional administrative center into a thriving international trading hub that attracted enterprising merchants from throughout Europe seeking profitable opportunities. The comprehensive construction of new market facilities dramatically improved harbor installations along the vital Valdava River, and extensively expanded storage warehouses created sophisticated infrastructure capable of handling substantially increased commercial traffic from distant markets. Archaeological evidence reveals intensive construction activity throughout this prosperous period, including major expansion of specialized craft workshops and residential districts that accommodated rapidly growing urban populations drawn by economic opportunities. The systematic establishment of new trade routes connecting Prague with distant markets generated substantial customs revenues, while simultaneously introducing exotic goods and advanced technologies that significantly enhanced overall Bohemian economic development and international competitiveness. Merchants traveling these lucrative routes regularly transported luxury merchandise from prosperous Byzantine territories, precious amber from remote Baltic regions, and sophisticated manufactured products from wealthy Italian cities, creating extensive commercial networks that linked Bohemia with profitable markets throughout Europe and beyond traditional boundaries. The comprehensive regulation of these complex trade relationships required sophisticated legal and administrative systems that convincingly demonstrated the kingdom's remarkable governmental maturity and administrative competence. Religious architecture flourished magnificently under generous royal patronage, as Vratislav commissioned major construction projects that simultaneously demonstrated both sincere pious devotion and impressive royal magnificence, befitting his elevated status. The comprehensive reconstruction of Prague Castle's Church of St. Vitus incorporated revolutionary architectural innovations borrowed from contemporary German and Italian examples, while carefully maintaining distinctively Bohemian decorative elements that reflected local artistic traditions. The church's substantially expanded choir, elaborate altar installations, and sophisticated sculptural programs created an appropriately majestic religious setting for important royal ceremonies, while simultaneously providing adequate space for the growing numbers of devoted pilgrims visiting St. Vaclav's increasingly popular shrine. The foundation of new monastic establishments throughout Bohemian territories reflected both genuine religious commitment and practical administrative considerations that strengthened royal authority. Braimnav Abbey, originally established during the 10th century, received substantial new endowments that enabled major expansion of its buildings and diverse economic activities supporting the religious community. The monastery's productive scriptorium created beautiful illuminated manuscripts that skillfully combined traditional Slavonic religious texts with contemporary Latin theological works, developing a distinctive artistic tradition that significantly influenced manuscript production throughout Central Europe. Archaeological investigations at Brivno have revealed extensive construction projects from this period, including new residential quarters for expanding monastic communities, expanded workshops for manuscript production, and sophisticated water management systems that demonstrated advanced engineering capabilities. Sazava Monastery represented a particularly significant development in Bohemian religious life, carefully maintaining cherished Slavonic liturgical traditions that connected Bohemian Christianity with its Byzantine origins, while operating successfully within the Roman ecclesiastical structure that governed Western Christianity. The monastery's unique position enabled it to serve as a crucial cultural bridge between Eastern and Western Christian traditions, producing important religious texts in both Slavonic and Latin scripts, while maintaining theological positions acceptable to Roman authorities throughout periods of religious tension. The monastery's extensive library preserved invaluable early Slavonic texts that might otherwise have been permanently lost during the period's numerous religious and political upheavals that threatened cultural continuity. Vratislav II's death in 1092 initiated a prolonged period of dynastic instability that would paradoxically strengthen the institutional foundations of Bohemian royal authority, while simultaneously creating the essential preconditions for unprecedented territorial expansion under later rulers. The succession disputes characterizing the late 11th and early 12th centuries forced competing Piemislid claimants to develop more sophisticated administrative systems and military organizations during their intense struggles for supremacy, innovations that would prove absolutely crucial during the great territorial expansion of the 13th century. The systematic development of comprehensive written administrative records during this transformative period, carefully preserved within monastic archives and castle repositories throughout the kingdom, demonstrates the remarkable bureaucratic sophistication that enabled increasingly effective territorial control and strategic resource mobilization across vast distances and diverse populations. Economic development continued flourishing despite persistent political instability driven by rapidly expanding trade relationships and revolutionary technological innovations that dramatically enhanced agricultural productivity and specialized craft production throughout Bohemian territories. The groundbreaking introduction of advanced mining techniques, borrowed from experienced German specialists working in the productive Harz Mountains, enabled far more efficient extraction of precious silver from extensive Bohemian deposits, while simultaneously reducing operational production costs. These crucial technological improvements generated substantially increased revenues that funded essential military reconstruction and comprehensive administrative expansion programs, providing the fundamental resources necessary for renewed territorial ambitions that would transform Central European political boundaries forever. The strategic establishment of numerous new market towns throughout Bohemian territories created sophisticated commercial networks that effectively linked rural producers with profitable distant markets, while generating substantial customs revenues for expanding royal coffers that supported increasingly ambitious governmental projects. Vladislav II's succession in 1140 marked the decisive beginning of renewed territorial expansion and the comprehensive restoration of Bohemian influence within Central European politics, after decades of internal consolidation. Vladislav's early military campaigns against established Hungarian positions throughout Slovakia convincingly demonstrated the remarkable military recovery that had occurred during previous decades, while simultaneously establishing his impressive credentials as an exceptionally effective military commander. His professional forces employed sophisticated siege techniques that enabled the systematic capture of strongly fortified positions, including the innovative use of advanced counterweight trebuchets and specialized undermining equipment that reflected contemporary advances in military engineering developed throughout medieval Europe. The Second Crusade of 1147 provided Vladislav with unprecedented opportunities to demonstrate formidable Bohemian military capabilities on the prestigious international stage, while securing crucial papal recognition of his territorial claims throughout disputed regions. Bohemian military contingents participated actively in the prolonged siege of Damascus, where their advanced engineering expertise proved absolutely invaluable in constructing complex siege works capable of threatening the city's formidable fortifications that had withstood numerous previous assaults. Although the crusade ultimately failed to achieve its primary religious objectives, active Bohemian participation significantly enhanced the kingdom's international reputation while establishing crucial diplomatic relationships that would prove tremendously valuable in subsequent territorial disputes with neighboring powers. Vladislav's calculated involvement in the devastating imperial civil wars that followed Conrad III's unexpected death during 1152 reflected his sophisticated understanding of the remarkable opportunities created by imperial weakness for territorial expansion by ambitious regional powers seeking to advance their interests. His crucial support for Frederick Barbarossa's imperial candidacy provided essential military assistance during decisive campaigns, while securing important imperial recognition of dramatically enhanced Bohemian autonomy within the traditional imperial system. The resulting comprehensive agreements established Bohemia's position as one of the empire's most important constituent kingdoms, while confirming royal prerogatives that had been disputed during previous reigns. The momentous elevation of Bohemia to hereditary kingdom status, formally confirmed by Frederick Barbarossa during 1158, represented the magnificent culmination of centuries of gradual political development, while establishing essential legal foundations for subsequent territorial expansion that would reshape Central European boundaries. Unlike the personal royal dignity previously granted to Vratislav II, which had expired with his death, this revolutionary new arrangement established permanent royal status for all Bohemian rulers, while dramatically reducing imperial interference and succession disputes that had previously destabilized the kingdom. This dramatically enhanced autonomy provided Bohemian monarchs with unprecedented freedom to pursue territorial ambitions without requiring imperial approval for each expansion campaign, fundamentally transforming the kingdom's strategic capabilities. Frederick's reign from 1178 to 1189 convincingly demonstrated the exceptional military and administrative capabilities that hereditary royal status had made possible, while simultaneously revealing the continuing challenges posed by persistent noble opposition to increasingly centralized royal authority. Frederick's ambitious campaigns against established Austrian positions along the strategically vital Danube River successfully extended Bohemian influence into territories that had previously remained outside Przemyslid control, while his comprehensive domestic policies strengthened royal authority through revolutionary administrative reforms and military innovations that transformed governmental effectiveness. The systematic construction of new royal castles at strategic locations throughout Bohemian territories provided secure operational bases for royal administration, while demonstrating the impressive architectural sophistication that characterized late 12th century Bohemian building projects, incorporating advanced defensive technologies. The succession crisis following Frederick's unexpected death during 1189 created dangerous opportunities for external intervention that threatened to reverse the valuable territorial gains achieved during previous decades of careful expansion. Konrad Otto of Znojmo, who claimed the throne based on his position as senior male member of the Przemyslid dynasty, received substantial support from Austrian and Hungarian forces that sought to establish compliant client rulers who would accommodate their own territorial ambitions. The resulting devastating conflicts severely damaged large areas of Bohemia and Moravia, while demonstrating the continuing crucial importance of external support in Bohemian succession disputes that could determine the kingdom's future direction. The eventual triumph of Ottokar Thin during 1197 initiated the most spectacularly successful period of territorial expansion in Bohemian history, while establishing the essential administrative and military foundations that would support sustained imperial ambitions throughout Central Europe. Ottokar's early reign focused intensively on internal consolidation and the comprehensive restoration of royal authority that had been significantly weakened during prolonged succession conflicts, implementing revolutionary administrative reforms that strengthened central government while carefully accommodating regional noble interests that might otherwise oppose royal policies. His systematic military reforms created professional armed forces capable of sustained campaign operations across vast distances, while his skillful diplomatic initiatives established crucial alliance networks that would prove absolutely essential during subsequent expansion campaigns against powerful opponents. The Golden Bull of Sicily, formally issued by Frederick II during 1212, represented the most significant constitutional development in Bohemian history, while establishing the comprehensive legal framework that would govern the kingdom's relationship with the Holy Roman Empire for subsequent centuries. The bull definitively confirmed Bohemia's status as a hereditary kingdom, while substantially reducing imperial interference in internal Bohemian affairs, including succession disputes, ecclesiastical appointments, and territorial administration that had previously required imperial approval. These revolutionary provisions reflected both imperial recognition of Bohemia's crucial importance within the imperial system and Frederick's urgent need for reliable allies during his bitter conflicts with papal authority and powerful Italian city-states that threatened imperial interests. The comprehensive constitutional arrangements established by the Golden Bull created unprecedented opportunities for independent Bohemian action in territorial expansion and diplomatic relationships that would transform the kingdom's strategic position. Unlike previous agreements that had required imperial approval for major policy initiatives, this revolutionary new framework enabled Bohemian monarchs to pursue territorial ambitions based on their own strategic calculations rather than imperial preferences that might conflict with Bohemian interests. This dramatically enhanced autonomy would prove absolutely crucial during the Great Expansion campaigns of the mid-13th century, when Bohemian forces operated far from imperial territories and often in direct opposition to imperial interests that conflicted with Bohemian objectives. The domestic implications of the Golden Bull extended far beyond constitutional relationships with the empire to encompass fundamental changes in internal Bohemian governance and social organization that would influence the kingdom for generations. The definitive confirmation of hereditary royal status eliminated the succession uncertainties that had plagued previous centuries, while establishing clear procedures for royal succession that dramatically reduced opportunities for external interference in Bohemian affairs. Economic provisions within the Golden Bull facilitated the commercial development that would provide essential resources for territorial expansion, while establishing Bohemia's position as a major Central European trading power capable of competing with established commercial centers. The bull confirmed complete royal control over mining operations, customs collection, and monetary policy, while reducing imperial taxation that had previously limited Bohemian economic development and territorial ambitions. Wenceslaus's reign from 1230 to 1253 established the crucial military and administrative foundations that would enable his son Ottokar II to achieve unprecedented territorial expansion, while demonstrating exceptional Bohemian capabilities in sustained campaign operations against sophisticated opponents employing advanced military technologies. The succession of Ottokar II in 1253 initiated the most ambitious period of territorial expansion in Central European history, setting the stage for achievements that would make Bohemia a dominant European power. As the young monarch embarked upon imperial ambitions that would temporarily forge a magnificent Bohemian empire, spanning from the frigid Baltic shores to the warm Adriatic coastline, Ottokar's initial military campaigns convincingly demonstrated the exceptional military capabilities that his accomplished predecessors had systematically developed, while simultaneously revealing his own extraordinary talents as both a brilliant military commander and astute political strategist. His methodical approach to territorial expansion masterfully combined decisive military conquest with skillful diplomatic negotiation and strategic dynastic marriages in sophisticated ways that maximized valuable Bohemian territorial gains while carefully minimizing the dangerous risks, inevitably, associated with simultaneous military conflicts across multiple vulnerable frontiers. The momentous acquisition of Austria during 1251, brilliantly achieved through Ottokar's politically advantageous marriage to Margaret of Babenberg, following the complete extinction of the Babenberg dynasty, provided Bohemia with crucial control over vital Danube River territories, while substantially increasing the kingdom's economic resources and military capabilities. Austrian territories encompass some of Central Europe's most productive agricultural lands, extensive profitable silver mining operations, and strategically positioned commercial centers that generated enormous customs revenues for the expanding royal treasury. The complex integration of established Austrian administrative systems with existing sophisticated Bohemian governmental structures required exceptional organizational capabilities that convincingly demonstrated the kingdom's remarkable bureaucratic maturity achieved through decades of administrative development. The aggressive expansion into Styria throughout the 1250s extended Bohemian territorial control southward toward the lucrative Adriatic, while simultaneously providing valuable access to extensive iron mining operations that significantly enhanced the kingdom's military production capabilities, weapons manufacturing. Styrian territories included crucial mountain passes that controlled essential access routes to profitable Italian markets, enabling Bohemia to decisively influence vital commercial relationships between prosperous northern and southern European trading centers. The challenging military campaigns required to secure Styrian territories convincingly demonstrated exceptional Bohemian capabilities in specialized alpine warfare, including innovative equipment and advanced tactics specifically adapted to demanding mountainous terrain conditions that differed dramatically from traditional battlefield environments. Carinthian territories acquired during the early 1260s provided Bohemia with direct access to lucrative Italian trade routes, while firmly establishing the kingdom's position as a major Central European power capable of significantly influencing imperial politics throughout Italian territories. The administrative integration of Carinthian territories required the establishment of entirely new governmental systems that could effectively accommodate local legal traditions, while ensuring unwavering loyalty to Bohemian royal authority throughout the expanded realm. Archaeological evidence from major Carinthian urban centers reveals extensive construction projects undertaken during the Bohemian occupation period, including comprehensive fortification improvements, expanded market facilities, and magnificent religious buildings that demonstrated the kingdom's serious commitment to long-term territorial control and administrative efficiency. The acquisition of Carniolan territories completed Ottokar's creation of a continuous territorial corridor connecting Bohemian heartlands with the strategically vital Adriatic coast, while providing complete control over Alpine passes that had previously remained outside effective Bohemian influence. These valuable territories included important commercial centers where enterprising Italian merchants regularly exchanged exotic goods with traders from northern European markets, generating substantial customs revenues that funded further ambitious territorial expansion campaigns. The strategic importance of Carniolan positions became dramatically evident during subsequent military conflicts, when control of these territories either enabled or prevented effective coordination between different theaters of military operations across the expanded empire. Military campaigns that achieved these remarkable territorial acquisitions convincingly demonstrated the exceptional sophistication of Bohemian military organization and the proven effectiveness of advanced combined arms tactics that seamlessly integrated heavily armored cavalry, disciplined infantry formations, specialized siege specialists, and professional support units capable of sustained operations across diverse geographic conditions. Bohemian forces employed standardized equipment and comprehensive training procedures that enabled highly effective coordination between military units drawn from different territorial regions, while maintaining the tactical flexibility necessary for adaptation to local battlefield requirements, enemy capabilities. The sophisticated logistical systems developed to support these extensive campaigns included specialized transport units, field hospitals, and well-organized supply trains that enabled sustained military operations far from traditional Bohemian territorial bases and supply centers. Diplomatic marriages carefully arranged to consolidate territorial gains reflected Ottokar's sophisticated understanding of complex dynastic politics and his exceptional ability to balance competing claims in ways that maximized Bohemian advantages while minimizing potential opposition. His strategic marriage to Kunigunde of Slavonia significantly strengthened Bohemian influence throughout southeastern European territories, while his daughter's politically advantageous marriage to Hungarian nobility established crucial alliance relationships that effectively neutralized potential Hungarian opposition to continued Bohemian expansion. These comprehensive diplomatic arrangements created extensive networks of relationships that extended Bohemian influence far beyond territories under direct royal control, while providing valuable early warning systems regarding potential threats to vital Bohemian interests throughout the region. The brief creation of a vast Central European empire under Bohemian leadership represented one of medieval political history's most remarkable achievements, convincingly demonstrating the extraordinary capabilities that systematic territorial expansion and comprehensive administrative development could create when directed by exceptional leadership and strategic vision. At its magnificent zenith around 1270, Ottokar's extensive territories included not only traditional Bohemian and Moravian lands, but also Austria, Styria, Carinthia, Carniola, and substantial portions of present-day Slovenia, creating a formidable political entity that rivaled the territorial extent of the Carolingian Empire at its historic peak. The administrative challenges posed by governing such culturally diverse territories required revolutionary innovations in governmental organization that significantly influenced political development throughout Central Europe for subsequent generations. The economic integration of expanded territories generated unprecedented revenues that funded further military expansion, while simultaneously supporting ambitious cultural and architectural projects that dramatically enhanced Bohemia's international reputation throughout medieval Europe. Silver production from mines throughout Bohemian, Austrian, and Styrian territories provided the essential monetary resources necessary for maintaining professional military forces, while agricultural surplus from fertile Danubian regions supported growing urban populations engaged in specialized craft production and extensive commercial activities. Trade revenues from systematic customs collection at strategic commercial centers enabled substantial investment in infrastructure projects that dramatically improved transportation networks and communication systems throughout the expanded kingdom. The cultural achievements characterizing Ottokar's reign reflected both the enormous resources made available through territorial expansion and the valuable international contacts resulting from governing diverse populations with different linguistic and religious traditions. Prague evolved into a major center of Gothic architecture, as generous royal patronage funded ambitious construction projects that employed master craftsmen from throughout Europe, while incorporating distinctive local artistic traditions that created unique architectural styles. The royal court attracted distinguished scholars, talented artists, and experienced administrators from distant regions, creating a cosmopolitan environment that fostered intellectual exchange and cultural innovation throughout the expanded realm. The growing conflict with Rudolf of Habsburg reflected both the inevitable opposition that extensive Bohemian expansion would generate from established imperial authorities and the specific challenges posed by Rudolf's election as Holy Roman Emperor during 1273. Rudolf's candidacy had been actively supported by princes who strongly opposed Ottokar's territorial ambitions and sought to restore traditional imperial authority over territories that had been acquired through Bohemian expansion campaigns. The resulting confrontation would decisively test whether Bohemian military capabilities and alliance networks could successfully sustain the territorial empire that Ottokar had created against the combined opposition of imperial forces and regional enemies. Rudolf's systematic campaign to isolate Bohemia diplomatically preceded the military confrontation that would ultimately determine the fate of Ottokar's territorial empire and Central European political development. The new emperor negotiated comprehensive agreements with Hungarian and Polish rulers that promised substantial territorial concessions in exchange for military support against Bohemian positions, while offering Austrian and Styrian nobles guarantees regarding their traditional privileges under Habsburg rather than Bohemian authority. The Battle of Marchfeld on August 26, 1278, represented the culmination of years of diplomatic maneuvering and military preparation as the largest armies assembled in Central Europe since the Magyar invasions met on the plains east of Vienna to determine the continent's political future. Ottokar's death during this decisive battle marked the end of Bohemian imperial ambitions and the beginning of a new era that would reshape Central European politics forever. However, the devastating Hungarian cavalry's perfectly coordinated flanking maneuver, executed in precise synchronization with a renewed imperial assault on vulnerable Bohemian positions, created catastrophic tactical circumstances that Ottokar's experienced forces could not overcome despite their individual courage, exceptional military competence, and unwavering dedication to their fallen monarch. Ottokar's heroic death during the final desperate stages of combat eliminated the visionary leadership that had created and sustained remarkable Bohemian territorial expansion, while simultaneously creating succession circumstances that prevented any effective resistance to the inevitable territorial losses that would follow this crushing defeat. The king's lifeless body, discovered among countless casualties after the battle's devastating conclusion, bore numerous wounds that clearly indicated he had fought personally in the final cavalry melees, rather than attempting to preserve his life for continued resistance against overwhelming odds. His noble death symbolized both the personal courage that had consistently characterized his military leadership throughout decades of successful campaigns and the tragic end of ambitious Bohemian imperial ambitions that had briefly transformed Central European political relationships forever. The immediate aftermath of Marchfeld witnessed the rapid collapse of extensive Bohemian territorial expansion as subject territories swiftly returned to their previous allegiances, while surviving Bohemian forces conducted organized withdrawals to defensive positions within traditional kingdom boundaries that could still be defended effectively. Austrian and Styrian territories quickly acknowledged Habsburg authority, while Carinthian and Carniolan regions accepted imperial administration that restored their previous constitutional arrangements with established local privileges. The alarming speed of this territorial collapse reflected both the intensely personal nature of medieval political relationships and the limited institutional development that had characterized Ottokar's rapid expansion across diverse territories. The catastrophic territorial losses following Ottokar's death at Marchfeld created a dangerous power vacuum throughout Central Europe that neighboring kingdoms rushed to exploit, while the Plymouth-Silid dynasty struggled desperately to maintain control over even their traditional Bohemian heartlands. The regency established for young Wenceslaus II proved completely incapable of preventing devastating Hungarian incursions into Moravian territories or preventing Austrian expansion into border regions that had previously acknowledged undisputed Bohemian authority. Internal noble factions, emboldened by obvious royal weakness, began asserting greater autonomy, while some openly negotiated with foreign powers regarding alternative political arrangements that would better serve their territorial interests and economic privileges. The shocking assassination of Wenceslaus III in 1306 eliminated the last male heir of the ancient Plymouth-Silid dynasty and precipitated a succession crisis that would fundamentally transform Bohemian political structures forever. The complete extinction of the revered royal line that had governed Bohemia for over 4 centuries created unprecedented constitutional circumstances, as no clear legal precedents existed for selecting new rulers from outside the established dynastic framework that had provided legitimacy for generations. Various claimants emerged from across Europe, each supported by different noble factions and foreign powers who recognized opportunities to advance their own territorial ambitions through the installation of compliant rulers who would serve their interests. Rudolf of Austria, representing Habsburg interests, claimed the Bohemian throne based on his marriage to Wenceslaus II's widow and his family's previous territorial holdings throughout the region. His candidacy received substantial support from nobles in southern Bohemia who had maintained profitable commercial relationships with Austrian territories and preferred accommodation with Habsburg power to the uncertainties associated with more distant claimants. Archaeological evidence from castles controlled by pro-Habsburg nobles reveals extensive fortification improvements during this turbulent period, clearly suggesting preparation for sustained military resistance against alternative claimants who might challenge their preferred arrangement. Henry of Carinthia presented competing claims based on his marriage to Anne of Bohemia, daughter of Wenceslaus II, and his previous administrative experience in territories that had formally acknowledged Bohemian authority throughout the imperial expansion period. His supporters included nobles from northern Bohemia, who had consistently opposed Habsburg expansion and preferred alliance with German princes who could provide military assistance against Austrian encroachment on traditional Bohemian territories. Henry's brief reign from 1307 to 1310 demonstrated both the military capabilities that foreign claimants could mobilize and the fundamental weaknesses created by dependence on external support for internal legitimacy within established Bohemian political traditions. The Bohemian nobility's calculated decision to offer the crown to John of Luxembourg in 1310 reflected sophisticated calculations regarding the kingdom's strategic position within the broader European political system, rather than mere opportunistic alliance seeking for short-term advantages. John's candidacy combined several attractive elements that appealed to different noble factions. His youth suggested potential for long-term dynastic stability. His family's territorial holdings in the Low Countries provided access to wealthy commercial regions, and his father Henry VII's recent election as Holy Roman Emperor offered prospects for imperial support without the direct subordination that Habsburg rule would have inevitably entailed. The complex marriage negotiations between John and Elizabeth of Bohemia, the last surviving child of Wenceslaus II, required careful attention to constitutional precedents and legal traditions that would legitimize the new dynasty's authority while preserving established noble privileges that had been guaranteed for generations. The marriage contracts negotiated during 1310 established Elizabeth's rights as Queen Regnant, while confirming John's authority as King Consort, creating a unique constitutional arrangement that balanced dynastic legitimacy with practical governmental needs that reflected Bohemian political realities. John's coronation in Prague during August 1310 marked the beginning of Luxembourg rule in Bohemia and initiated a period of unprecedented international engagement that would transform the kingdom's role within European politics for centuries to come. The ceremony itself demonstrated the new dynasty's commitment to maintaining cherished Bohemian traditions while introducing elements that reflected their broader European connections and international perspective. The early years of John's reign revealed both his exceptional military talents that would make him legendary throughout Europe and his fundamental misunderstanding of Bohemian political traditions and economic requirements that governed effective royal authority. His immediate departure from military campaigns in Italy left governmental administration in the hands of appointed regents who lacked the personal relationships with noble families that had traditionally facilitated effective royal authority throughout Bohemian territories. These administrative arrangements generated widespread resentment among nobles who expected direct access to royal decision-making, while creating dangerous opportunities for corruption and mismanagement that weakened the kingdom's financial resources. John's ambitious Italian campaigns demonstrated the military capabilities that would make him one of Europe's most celebrated knights while revealing the enormous costs associated with sustained military operations in distant territories that provided limited benefits to Bohemian interests. His forces participated in complex conflicts between papal authority and imperial claims throughout northern Italy, where Bohemian heavy cavalry proved particularly effective in siege warfare that characterized most military operations during this period. The campaigns provided John with valuable combat experience and international recognition, while generating substantial costs that strained Bohemian financial resources and created domestic political tensions that would plague his reign. The siege of Brescia during 1311 showcased both John's personal courage and the tactical innovations that Bohemian forces had developed during their extensive Italian service under royal leadership. Bohemian engineers constructed sophisticated siege works that employed advanced counterweight trebuchets and specialized undermining techniques to breach the city's formidable fortifications that had withstood previous assaults. The successful capture of Brescia after a prolonged siege demonstrated continued Bohemian military competence, while providing substantial booty that partially offset campaign expenses and maintained troop morale. Bohemian involvement in imperial politics intensified. Following Henry VII's death during 1309, John's subsequent support for his brother-in-law Charles of France during the complex succession disputes that followed throughout the empire. These diplomatic commitments required substantial military contributions that further strained Bohemian resources while providing limited direct benefits to the kingdom's territorial or commercial interests that should have been prioritized. The domestic opposition that emerged during John's frequent absences reflected both specific grievances regarding excessive taxation and military service obligations, and broader concerns about the kingdom's strategic direction under foreign dynastic rule that seemed to prioritize external adventures over internal development. The rebellion led by Henry of Lippard during 1315 represented the most serious challenge to John's authority and revealed the alarming extent of noble dissatisfaction with Luxembourg rule and its consequences for Bohemian prosperity and security. John's decisive return to Bohemian territories during 1316 to confront the escalating rebellion brilliantly showcased his exceptional military talents within domestic contexts, while simultaneously revealing his remarkable capacity for political compromise when circumstances demanded accommodation rather than direct confrontation with opposing forces. His experienced forces employed revolutionary siege techniques to systematically reduce rebel strongholds that had seemed impregnable, while his skillful diplomatic initiatives offered generous amnesty and substantial compensation to nobles who abandoned the rebellion and returned to royal allegiance. The successful resolution of this dangerous crisis significantly strengthened royal authority throughout the kingdom, while establishing crucial precedents for noble participation in governmental administration that would fundamentally characterize subsequent Luxembourg rule for generations. The comprehensive economic policies implemented following the rebellion's suppression reflected John's mature recognition of the urgent need to balance ambitious international military commitments with essential domestic resource requirements that sustained the kingdom's prosperity. Revolutionary taxation systems were established that provided far more predictable revenues while eliminating the arbitrary levies that had generated dangerous noble opposition throughout previous years of Luxembourg rule. These groundbreaking fiscal reforms included standardized assessment procedures and regular collection schedules that dramatically improved governmental efficiency, while providing nobles with greater certainty regarding their financial obligations to the crown. The reforms also established innovative commercial regulations that enhanced trade revenues while protecting vital merchant interests that had suffered extensively during prolonged periods of political instability and military conflict. The dramatic expansion of silver mining operations throughout the prosperous 1320s provided John with the essential financial resources necessary to pursue renewed military campaigns while simultaneously maintaining domestic political stability that prevented internal opposition. Revolutionary extraction techniques borrowed from experienced German mining specialists enabled far more efficient exploitation of valuable Bohemian silver deposits, while substantially reducing operational production costs that had previously limited mining profitability. The dramatically increased silver production generated enormous revenues that successfully funded both ambitious military expeditions and crucial domestic infrastructure projects, creating favorable economic conditions that supported continued Luxembourg dynastic rule. Despite ongoing concerns about the dynasty's extensive international commitments, John's active participation in the crusading movement reflected both his sincere personal religious convictions and his strategic understanding of the valuable diplomatic advantages that crusading service could provide for ambitious rulers seeking to enhance their international reputations. His involvement in the demanding Prussian Crusades throughout the 1320s brought experienced Bohemian forces into direct contact with the formidable Teutonic Knights, while providing unprecedented opportunities for territorial expansion in remote regions that had previously remained outside Central European political influence. These challenging campaigns convincingly demonstrated exceptional Bohemian military capabilities under harsh Baltic conditions, while establishing crucial diplomatic relationships that would prove tremendously valuable during subsequent territorial conflicts. The extensive Lithuanian campaigns that occupied much of John's attention throughout the turbulent 1330s represented some of the most challenging military operations ever undertaken by medieval Bohemian forces, requiring difficult adaptation to forest warfare conditions and enemy tactics that differed substantially from conventional Western European military practices. Bohemian forces employed specialized equipment specifically designed for woodland operations, including portable bridges for treacherous river crossings and modified siege engines, adapted to dense woodland conditions that limited traditional siege warfare. The campaigns achieved limited territorial gains, while providing invaluable military experience that significantly enhanced Bohemian capabilities in unconventional warfare situations that would prove crucial during future conflicts. The growing tensions with France throughout the 1330s created complex diplomatic complications that would ultimately lead to John's heroic death at Crécy, while demonstrating the intricate international relationships that Luxembourg rule had created for Bohemia. John's binding alliance obligations to France required extensive military service against English forces during the opening phases of what would become the devastating Hundred Years' War, commitments that placed valuable Bohemian forces in conflicts that had minimal direct relevance to the kingdom's strategic interests. These military obligations reflected both the significant advantages and dangerous disadvantages of the international connections that Luxembourg dynastic rule had established throughout Europe. The legendary Battle of Crécy on August 26, 1346, represented both the magnificent culmination of John's distinguished military career and the tragic consequences of chivalric idealism when confronted with innovative military technologies and revolutionary tactics. Despite being nearly blind from previous injuries sustained during his numerous military campaigns across Europe, John courageously insisted on participating personally in the cavalry charges against well-prepared English positions. His decision to fight, despite severe physical limitations, reflected both exceptional personal courage and unwavering adherence to chivalric codes that valued honor above practical considerations of military effectiveness or dynastic continuity. The English longbowmen at Crecy employed tactical innovations that proved devastatingly effective against traditional heavy cavalry charges, creating circumstances where individual courage and martial skill provided minimal advantage against concentrated mass archery fire. John's forces, fighting alongside French knights, encountered withering volleys of arrows that decimated their ranks before they could engage in close combat, where their superior armor and weapons would have provided decisive advantages. Archaeological evidence from the battlefield includes numerous arrowheads and armor fragments that demonstrate the intensity of the archery bombardment that determined the battle's catastrophic outcome for the Continental forces. John's heroic death during the final cavalry charges eliminated one of Europe's most experienced military commanders, while creating succession circumstances that would enable his brilliant son Charles to transform Bohemia into the political and cultural center of Central Europe. The discovery of John's body among the fallen, identified by the distinctive Luxembourg heraldry on his surcoat, confirmed both his personal participation in the combat and his unwavering adherence to chivalric principles that prioritized honor over survival. His noble death symbolized both the end of an era of Bohemian military adventurism and the beginning of a transformative period focused on internal development and unprecedented imperial ambitions. The immediate succession of Charles I to the Bohemian throne during 1346 coincided with his election as Holy Roman Emperor, creating extraordinary opportunities for Bohemian influence within the imperial system, while establishing Prague as a major center of European politics. Charles's exceptional educational background, which included extensive study in Paris and valuable administrative experience in Italy, provided him with sophisticated understanding of contemporary governmental practices and diplomatic relationships that would prove crucial during his transformation of Bohemia into an imperial capital. His remarkable multilingual abilities and extensive cultural knowledge enabled effective communication with diverse populations throughout his territories, while facilitating the international relationships necessary for sustained imperial authority. The transfer of the imperial capital from traditional German centers to Prague represented one of the most significant political developments in 14th century Europe and demonstrated Charles's visionary understanding of Bohemia's potential role within the broader imperial system. The decision required massive investment in architectural projects and administrative infrastructure that would accommodate the governmental apparatus necessary for imperial administration, while providing appropriate settings for ceremonial activities that legitimized imperial authority. Archaeological evidence from Prague Castle reveals extensive construction projects initiated during Charles's early reign, including new residential quarters, administrative buildings, and ceremonial spaces designed to rival the imperial centers of previous centuries. The architectural transformation of Prague under Charles's generous patronage created one of Europe's most impressive urban centers, while demonstrating the kingdom's cultural sophistication and remarkable economic capabilities. The construction of St. Vitus Cathedral, begun in 1344, employed master craftsmen from throughout Europe, while incorporating architectural innovations that reflected contemporary developments in Gothic design. The cathedral's elaborate facade, sophisticated structural systems, and extensive sculptural programs created a magnificent religious setting appropriate for imperial coronations, while providing adequate space for growing numbers of pilgrims visiting Bohemian religious sites. The foundation of Charles University during 1348 established the first university in Central Europe and created an institutional center for scholarly activity that attracted distinguished students and faculty from throughout the continent. The university's comprehensive curriculum included traditional subjects of theology, law, and medicine, while incorporating newer disciplines that reflected contemporary intellectual developments throughout European academic centers. The establishment of separate colleges for different linguistic groups enabled effective instruction for the diverse student population, while maintaining rigorous academic standards that successfully rivaled those of established universities in Paris and Oxford. The university's magnificent library, established through generous royal patronage and substantial private donations, preserved invaluable manuscripts while supporting groundbreaking scholarly research that dramatically enhanced Bohemia's intellectual reputation throughout medieval Europe. The construction of Charles Bridge, begun during 1357, represented both a remarkable engineering achievement and a powerful symbol of Prague's transformation into a major European capital rivaling established centers of power. The bridge's sophisticated design employed revolutionary construction techniques that enabled it to withstand the Vltava River's devastating seasonal flooding while providing adequate capacity for the dramatically increased commercial traffic that imperial status had generated throughout the kingdom. The bridge's elaborate decorative elements, including intricate sculptural programs and sophisticated architectural details, demonstrated the exceptional artistic capabilities that generous royal patronage had fostered while creating a distinctive urban landmark that significantly enhanced Prague's international reputation. The cultural flowering characterizing Charles's reign attracted talented artists, distinguished scholars, and skilled craftsmen from throughout Europe, while simultaneously fostering distinctive Bohemian traditions in manuscript illumination, architectural design, and religious art that influenced development across the continent. The royal court evolved into a prestigious center of international cultural exchange, where different artistic traditions merged to create innovative forms of expression that significantly influenced artistic development throughout Central Europe for generations. The court's patronage of manuscript production resulted in illuminated texts that skillfully combined traditional Bohemian decorative elements with contemporary European artistic innovations, creating exceptional works that demonstrated both technical excellence and remarkable cultural sophistication. The comprehensive administrative reforms implemented during Charles's reign created governmental structures capable of managing the expanded territories under Bohemian control, while maintaining the efficiency necessary for effective imperial administration across diverse populations. Revolutionary bureaucratic procedures standardized record-keeping practices, while establishing clear hierarchies of authority that enabled effective coordination between different administrative levels throughout the expanding imperial system. These reforms included the establishment of written legal codes that clarified judicial procedures, while protecting traditional noble privileges within the framework of enhanced royal authority that balanced competing interests. The economic policies supporting Charles's architectural and cultural projects reflected sophisticated understanding of the crucial relationship between commercial development and effective political authority throughout medieval kingdoms. Revolutionary trade agreements with Italian city-states and Flemish commercial centers enhanced Prague's position as a major commercial hub, while generating substantial customs revenues that funded continued construction projects and cultural patronage. The regulation of craft production through guild systems ensured quality standards, while providing additional tax revenues that supported governmental expansion and the development of professional administrative classes. These economic developments created unprecedented urban prosperity that attracted additional population while generating the wealth necessary for sustained cultural patronage and architectural projects. Wenceslaus's succession during 1378 coincided with the beginning of the Western Schism and created circumstances that would test both Bohemian governmental institutions and the kingdom's position within the broader European political system. Wenceslaus inherited substantial territorial holdings and well-developed administrative systems, but he also faced challenges created by the Papal Schism, growing religious tensions within Bohemia, and noble opposition to policies that had concentrated authority in royal hands. His reign would reveal both the strengths and weaknesses of the governmental structures that Charles had created, while establishing the preconditions for the religious crisis that would dominate early 15th century Bohemian politics. The religious tensions building throughout Wenceslaus's reign reached a critical juncture with the emergence of Jan Hus as a prominent voice for ecclesiastical reform and Czech national identity that would transform European Christianity. Hus, appointed rector of Prague University during 1409, had absorbed the theological writings of John Wycliffe during his studies and began advocating for fundamental changes in church practices that resonated deeply with both scholarly circles and ordinary Bohemians frustrated by clerical corruption. His sermons at Bethlehem Chapel, delivered in Czech rather than Latin, attracted audiences that included nobles, burghers, and craftsmen who had grown increasingly resentful of the wealth and moral failings displayed by many church officials throughout the kingdom. The theological positions that Huss developed during his tenure at Prague University challenged fundamental assumptions about ecclesiastical authority, while appealing to Czech national sentiments that had been fostered by decades of cultural development under Charles I. His treatises argued that the true church consisted of the predestined faithful rather than the institutional hierarchy, that papal authority derived from moral worthiness rather than apostolic succession, and that scripture should be accessible to ordinary believers in their native language. These revolutionary ideas struck at the heart of medieval church organization, while providing intellectual justification for Czech resistance to German ecclesiastical dominance that had characterized Bohemian religious life since the establishment of the Prague bishopric. The Council of Constance convened during 1414 to resolve the Western Schism and address growing calls for church reform throughout Europe, provided Huss's opponents with an opportunity to eliminate his influence while demonstrating their commitment to ecclesiastical orthodoxy. Emperor Sigismund, who had inherited the Bohemian crown following his brother Wenceslaus's death during 1419, issued a safe conduct guarantee that promised Huss protection during his journey to Constance and participation in the council's proceedings. This imperial protection reflected both Sigismund's desire to resolve religious tensions within his territories and his confidence that conciliar authorities would handle the Hussite controversy in ways that strengthened rather than weakened established church structures. Huss's arrival in Constance during November 1414 marked the beginning of proceedings that would transform a theological dispute into a catalyst for revolutionary upheaval throughout Central Europe with lasting consequences. The safe conduct that Sigismund had provided proved worthless when conciliar authorities arrested Huss shortly after his arrival, arguing that imperial guarantees could not protect heretics from ecclesiastical justice. The arrest violated both imperial authority and diplomatic conventions, while demonstrating the council's determination to eliminate reform movements that threatened established church hierarchy throughout Europe. Archaeological evidence from Constance includes remains of the prison where Huss was held, revealing the harsh conditions that characterized his 8-month incarceration before trial proceedings began. The trial proceedings beginning during June 1415 revealed the fundamental incompatibility between Huss's theological positions and the ecclesiastical orthodoxy that conciliar authorities sought to maintain throughout Christendom. The charges against Huss included denial of papal supremacy, advocacy of communion in both kinds for lay believers, and promotion of vernacular religious services that undermined clerical authority throughout the established hierarchy. The trial transcripts preserved in Constance archives demonstrate both the sophisticated theological arguments that Huss presented in his defense and the predetermined nature of proceedings designed to secure his condemnation rather than engage seriously with reform proposals. Huss's refusal to recant his theological positions during the final trial session on July 6, 1415, sealed his fate while providing Czech reformers with a martyred leader whose death would inspire decades of religious warfare throughout Central Europe. His final statement to the council affirmed his commitment to scriptural authority over human traditions, while expressing confidence that future generations would vindicate his theological positions against institutional corruption. The execution that followed immediately after his condemnation employed the traditional method of burning, with Huss's ashes scattered in the Rhine River to prevent the collection of relics that might inspire continued devotion to his memory. News of Huss's execution reached Prague during late July 1415 and provoked immediate outrage among university scholars, noble supporters and ordinary citizens who had followed his teachings and viewed him as their spiritual leader. The violation of imperial safe conduct guarantees particularly enraged Czech nobles who viewed Sigismund's failure to protect Huss as both a betrayal of imperial honor and evidence of German contempt for Czech interests. Public demonstrations in Prague included the burning of papal bulls and the destruction of property belonging to clergy who had supported Huss's condemnation, while university masters issued formal protests condemning both the trial procedures and the execution itself. The religious ferment following Huss's death crystallized around the 4 Articles of Prague formulated during 1420 as a comprehensive statement of Czech reform, demands that would guide the revolutionary movement throughout subsequent wars. The first article demanded freedom of preaching throughout Bohemian territories, challenging the church hierarchy's control over religious instruction while establishing the principle that qualified individuals could interpret Scripture regardless of ordination status. The second article required communion in both kinds, for all believers, eliminating the distinction between clerical and lay communion that had symbolized ecclesiastical hierarchy throughout medieval Christianity, representing Czech rejection of German religious dominance, while asserting spiritual equality of all believers. The third article called for the complete elimination of clerical property ownership and temporal authority, arguing that priests should live in apostolic poverty while focusing exclusively on spiritual duties rather than accumulating worldly wealth and political power. This provision targeted the extensive land holdings that had made the Bohemian Church one of the kingdom's wealthiest institutions, while addressing widespread popular resentment of clerical involvement in secular politics that had corrupted religious mission. The implementation of this article would require massive redistribution of church properties that comprised approximately 1/3 of all Bohemian agricultural land, creating powerful economic incentives for noble support of the Hussite movement that promised substantial territorial gains. The fourth article demanded punishment for mortal sins regardless of the perpetrator's social status, challenging the legal immunities that had protected clerical criminals while expressing broader demands for social justice throughout Bohemian society. This provision reflected popular anger at clerical corruption while asserting principles of legal equality that directly contradicted medieval social hierarchies that had protected elite privileges for centuries. The article's implementation would require fundamental changes in legal procedures and judicial authority that extended far beyond religious reform to encompass comprehensive social transformation throughout the kingdom. The first defenestration of Prague on July 30th, 1419, transformed religious protest into open rebellion while establishing violent precedents that would characterize subsequent Hussite resistance to Catholic authority throughout Central Europe. The incident began as a peaceful procession led by radical preacher Jan Jalivsky to demand the release of Hussite prisoners held in Prague's new town hall for their religious beliefs. When municipal authorities refused to comply with these demands, the enraged crowd forced entry into the building and threw several Catholic councillors from upper-story windows onto the pikes of supporters gathered below in the street. The defenestration eliminated Catholic political leadership in Prague while demonstrating Hussite willingness to employ extreme violence against their opponents when peaceful methods failed to achieve reform objectives. The immediate aftermath of the defenestration witnessed the complete collapse of royal authority in Prague as Hussite radicals seized control of municipal government and began implementing comprehensive religious reforms throughout the city. Catholic clergy fled to safer territories while their properties were confiscated and redistributed among Hussite supporters who had long resented ecclesiastical wealth and privilege. The city's churches were systematically purged of religious images and decorations that Hussites considered idolatrous, with valuable items sold to fund military preparations while architectural modifications accommodated new liturgical practices. Archaeological investigations of Prague churches have revealed extensive evidence of this iconoclastic campaign, including damaged sculptures and altered altar arrangements that reflected fundamental changes in religious practice. King Wenceslaus's death during August 1419, reportedly triggered by apoplexy upon learning of the defenestration, eliminated the last hope for peaceful resolution of religious tensions, while creating succession circumstances that would legitimize armed resistance to Catholic authority. His brother Sigismund's claim to the Bohemian throne faced immediate rejection from Hussite nobles, who viewed him as responsible for Hussa's death and feared that his rule would bring systematic persecution of Czech reformers. The succession crisis provided Hussites with legal justification for their rebellion, while creating opportunities for territorial expansion that would transform religious conflict into comprehensive social revolution. The Hussite military organization emerging during the winter of 1419 to 1420 represented one of the most innovative developments in medieval warfare, combining religious motivation with tactical innovations that would influence military development throughout Europe. The movement's early leaders included minor nobles and urban professionals who possessed sufficient education to understand complex theological arguments, while maintaining connections with ordinary craftsmen and farmers who provided the movement's numerical strength. This unique social composition enabled Hussite forces to combine aristocratic military expertise with popular enthusiasm in ways that proved devastatingly effective against traditional feudal armies. Jan Žižka emerged as the movement's most capable military commander, bringing extensive combat experience from previous service in royal armies while demonstrating exceptional talent for innovative tactics and strategic planning. His background included participation in the Battle of Grunwald during 1410, where he had observed the effectiveness of disciplined infantry formations against heavy cavalry charges that had traditionally dominated European battlefields. Žižka's early Hussite campaigns revealed his understanding of the movement's military limitations, while showcasing his ability to transform apparent weaknesses into tactical advantages that confounded enemy expectations. The war wagon formations that became synonymous with Hussite military success represented Žižka's most significant tactical innovation, creating mobile fortifications that provided protection for infantry forces while maintaining the flexibility necessary for offensive operations. These wagons, constructed according to standardized designs that enabled rapid deployment and effective coordination, incorporated iron reinforcements and specialized weapon mounts that transformed ordinary transport vehicles into formidable military equipment. The wagon crews included crossbowmen, handgunners, and flail-wielding infantry who could deliver devastating firepower while remaining protected from cavalry charges that had traditionally dominated medieval battlefields throughout Europe. The Battle of Sudermania on March 25, 1420, provided the first major demonstration of war wagon effectiveness, while establishing Žižka's reputation as one of Europe's most innovative military commanders. His forces, numbering fewer than 400 men, faced a Catholic army of approximately 2,000 troops that included experienced knights and professional soldiers, confident in their ability to crush peasant rebels. The Hussite deployment created a wagon fortress on elevated ground that channeled enemy attacks into predetermined killing zones where crossbow and early firearm volleys could achieve maximum effectiveness against armored opponents. The Catholic assault on the wagon fortress revealed the fundamental tactical problems that traditional heavy cavalry faced when confronting well-prepared defensive positions equipped with missile weapons. The knights' charges, which had proven decisive in countless previous battles, became suicidal attacks against protected infantry who could reload and fire repeatedly while remaining safe from retaliation. The battle's outcome demonstrated that disciplined common soldiers, armed with appropriate weapons, could defeat the military elite that had dominated European warfare for centuries, encouraging similar tactical innovations throughout the continent. The Siege of Prague during 1420 by Sigismund's forces provided Žižka with opportunities to demonstrate war wagon effectiveness in defensive operations, while revealing the broader strategic implications of Hussite military innovations. The imperial army, which included contingents from throughout the Holy Roman Empire, employed traditional siege techniques that proved inadequate against defenders who could sally from the city using mobile wagon fortresses that provided protection during withdrawal. The siege's failure after several months of ineffective operations demonstrated both Hussite defensive capabilities and the inadequacy of conventional military methods against innovative opponents. The Hussite counterattacks that followed the siege's collapse extended their territorial control throughout Bohemia, while demonstrating the offensive potential of war wagon tactics when properly coordinated with cavalry and infantry support. Žižka's forces captured numerous Catholic strongholds through systematic campaigns that combined siege warfare with mobile operations designed to prevent enemy reinforcement or relief efforts. These victories provided Hussites with substantial military resources while eliminating Catholic bases that had threatened their territorial consolidation throughout the kingdom. The development of Hussite artillery capabilities represented another significant military innovation that enhanced their siege warfare effectiveness, while demonstrating their ability to adapt contemporary military technology to their specific tactical requirements. Hussite foundries produced cannon designs that emphasized mobility and rapid deployment, rather than the massive siege guns that characterized contemporary artillery development throughout Europe. These weapons could be transported with war wagon formations, while providing sufficient firepower to breach medieval fortifications that lacked the architectural modifications necessary to withstand gunpowder weapons. The Battle of Witikow Hill on July 14, 1420, showcased the defensive potential of combined war wagon and artillery tactics, while providing Gishka with his most celebrated victory against overwhelming numerical odds. The Hussite position, fortified with wagon barriers and artillery emplacements, faced assault by Sigismund's entire army in a desperate attempt to capture Prague through elimination of its primary defensive outpost. The battle's outcome demonstrated that properly prepared positions could withstand massive assaults while inflicting casualties that made continued siege operations impossible, establishing Hussite military dominance that would last for decades. When the most feared military genius of medieval Europe drew his final breath in 1424, the tremors of his death shook the foundations of an entire continent. Jan Žižka's passing didn't just mark the end of a life, it triggered the collapse of the most revolutionary military force the world had ever witnessed. The man who had turned peasants into an unstoppable war machine, who had made Catholic Europe tremble at the mere mention of his name, was gone, and with him died the strategic brilliance that had kept the Hussite movement unified and victorious. The warriors he left behind understood the magnitude of their loss immediately. They embraced a haunting new identity, the orphans, a name that captured their profound grief and determination to honor their fallen commander. These battle-hardened veterans possessed all the tactical knowledge Žižka had drilled into them. They knew every formation, every maneuver, every deadly innovation that had made their armies legendary. Yet something irreplaceable had vanished with their leader's death. The visionary mind that could see beyond individual battles to craft campaigns that reshaped nations. Without Žižka's unifying presence, cracks began appearing in what had once been an impenetrable alliance. Military commanders who had previously followed a single strategic vision now pursued competing agendas. The disciplined coordination that had made Hussite forces seem almost supernatural in their effectiveness started fragmenting into jealous rivalries and conflicting objectives. Catholic observers watched with growing hope as their most dangerous enemies began turning their weapons toward internal disputes rather than external conquest. Into this chaos stepped Prokop the Great, a figure whose emergence would prove that exceptional leadership could still emerge from the movement's ranks. Unlike the common-born Žižka, Prokop brought university education and administrative expertise to his military command. His academic background provided him with diplomatic skills and political awareness that complemented his battlefield competence. Where Žižka had been a pure warrior, Prokop understood the delicate balance between military action and political maneuvering that sustained successful rebellions. Prokop's greatest achievement lay not in any single victory, but in his ability to hold together a movement that logic suggested should have collapsed. His charismatic leadership bridged the growing gaps between radical and moderate factions within Hussite ranks. When extremists demanded total war and moderates sought negotiated peace, Prokop found ways to maintain unity without betraying either vision completely. His political acumen enabled him to navigate the treacherous waters of internal Hussite politics while keeping Catholic enemies at bay. The years following Žižka's death became a testament to both Hussite resilience and growing vulnerability. Under Prokop's guidance, Hussite armies launched the audacious Moravian campaign of 1423 to 1424, pushing their influence far beyond traditional Bohemian territories. This offensive demonstrated that even without their legendary founder, Hussite forces retained their capacity for sustained operations in enemy territory. They captured major strongholds that had seemed impregnable, revealing how effectively Žižka's tactical innovations could function under competent leadership. Archaeological discoveries in conquered Moravian castles tell fascinating stories of Hussite occupation. These fortifications underwent extensive modifications during their brief period under Hussite control. Artillery positions were constructed with precision that reflected advanced understanding of siege warfare. Religious artwork that offended Hussite theological sensibilities was systematically removed or destroyed. These changes demonstrate how thoroughly the movement had developed not just military capabilities, but comprehensive administrative systems for governing conquered territories. The success in Moravia emboldened Hussite leaders to launch even more ambitious campaigns during the late 1420s. Their armies penetrated deep into Austria, Bavaria, and Saxony, conducting raids that generated enormous wealth while terrorizing Catholic populations. These expeditions represented the peak of Hussite military achievement, demonstrating their transformation from desperate rebels into a conquering force that threatened the stability of Central Europe. Yet this expansion came at tremendous cost. Sustained warfare drained Hussite resources and manpower, while creating international coalitions dedicated to their destruction. The movement's internal divisions, temporarily masked by military success, grew more pronounced as different factions pursued incompatible objectives. Radical Taborites, centered in their fortress city, demanded complete victory over Catholic forces regardless of consequences. Moderate Hussites increasingly sought negotiated settlements that would preserve their religious gains while ending the devastating cycle of warfare. By the early 1430s, exhaustion had become the defining characteristic of Hussite military operations. The enormous costs of maintaining armies in the field for over a decade had stretched the movement's resources to breaking points. Internal debates over war aims and negotiation possibilities consumed energy that had previously focused on military operations. Catholic diplomatic initiatives exploited these divisions skillfully, offering compromises that appealed to war-weary moderates while alarming radicals who viewed any accommodation as betrayal. The Council of Basil's decision to engage in serious negotiations with Hussite representatives marked a revolutionary shift in Catholic strategy. For the first time, ecclesiastical authorities acknowledged that heretical movements possessed legitimacy worthy of diplomatic recognition. This unprecedented invitation for Hussite theologians to present their positions before church councils represented a tacit admission that military suppression had failed completely. The negotiations beginning in 1433 would ultimately produce agreements that transformed both Hussite and Catholic approaches to religious conflict. The Compactata of 1436 established precedents for religious accommodation that would influence European development for centuries. These diplomatic achievements demonstrated that even movements born in violent rebellion could evolve toward peaceful coexistence when circumstances demanded compromise from all parties involved. The burdens facing Vladislaus's government extended far beyond mere politics. They struck at the very economic heart of a once prosperous kingdom. Bohemia's legendary silver mines, which had transformed the region into medieval Europe's treasure vault during the 14th century, were failing catastrophically. The rich veins that had funded royal courts and financed grand architectural projects were becoming exhausted. Worse yet, the kingdom lacked the advanced extraction technologies that might have revived declining production. While other European powers invested in innovative mining techniques, Bohemia's resources remained trapped beneath increasingly unproductive shafts. Agricultural devastation painted an equally grim picture across the countryside. Entire regions still bore scars from the Hussite conflicts, their populations never fully recovering from decades of warfare. Villages that had once supported thriving communities remained partially abandoned, their fields returning to wilderness for lack of farmers to work them. Even areas that maintained agricultural activity struggled with productivity levels that fell far short of pre-war standards. The social fabric that had supported rural prosperity had been torn apart, leaving communities unable to achieve the economic vitality they had once enjoyed. Manufacturing faced its own crisis as Bohemian craftsmen discovered their products could no longer compete in international markets. During the kingdom's period of internal turmoil, Italian and Flemish production centres had revolutionized their manufacturing processes, developing efficiency standards that left Bohemian goods expensive and obsolete. Workshops that had once exported their products throughout Central Europe found themselves unable to match the quality and pricing of foreign competitors who had embraced technological innovations while Bohemia fought civil wars. The constitutional restrictions imposed on royal authority created a fiscal nightmare that would have challenged even the most capable administrator. The Diet's stranglehold over taxation prevented systematic revenue collection just when the kingdom needed resources most desperately. Traditional noble exemptions shrunk the tax base to inadequate levels, while customs duties and mining revenues proved insufficient for basic governmental operations. Royal authority withered as Vladislaus found himself dependent on noble cooperation for functions that previous monarchs had controlled directly. Military deterioration followed inevitably from fiscal constraints and constitutional limitations. The professional armies that had made Hussite forces legendary had been disbanded following the peace agreements, replaced by noble levies that possessed neither adequate training nor modern equipment. These amateur forces would prove helpless against well-organized enemies employing contemporary military technologies. Castle fortifications, damaged during the wars and never properly restored, crumbled while expensive artillery and firearms remained beyond the kingdom's financial reach. The Hungarian throne's availability following Matthias Corvinus's death in 1490 presented Vladislaus with opportunities that seemed magnificent but would prove ruinously expensive. The Hungarian Diet's decision to elect him created a personal union that theoretically doubled his territorial authority. However, this expansion brought obligations that would drain Bohemian resources for generations without providing corresponding benefits to Bohemian interests. Hungary's southern frontiers faced relentless Ottoman pressure that demanded constant military attention and enormous financial investment. These defensive requirements offered little direct advantage to Bohemian commercial or strategic concerns while consuming resources desperately needed for domestic reconstruction. The administrative nightmare of governing two kingdoms with completely different legal systems, religious traditions, and strategic priorities revealed medieval governmental structures' inadequacy for managing expanded territorial responsibilities. Vladislaus attempted to address these challenges by maintaining separate administrative systems for each kingdom, while coordinating policies affecting both territories. This approach created bureaucratic complexities that overwhelmed available personnel while generating conflicts between competing national interests that proved impossible to resolve satisfactorily. The king's frequent absences from Bohemia to address Hungarian affairs further weakened royal authority in Prague, enabling the Diet to assert even greater control over domestic policies. Ottoman expansion during the 1490s introduced military pressures that would dominate policy throughout the remainder of Vladislaus's reign, while exposing the kingdom's tragic unpreparedness for modern warfare. Ottoman forces employed siege techniques, infantry formations, and artillery capabilities that proved devastatingly effective against fortifications designed for medieval rather than contemporary military technologies. Their systematic approach to conquest eliminated defensive barriers that had protected Central Europe for centuries, while creating refugee populations that strained regional resources. The Battle of Krabar Field in 1493 demonstrated these realities with shocking clarity. Ottoman forces destroyed a major Croatian army, revealing both their military organization's effectiveness and traditional Central European defensive strategies' complete inadequacy against early modern warfare techniques. The Croatian defeat eliminated one of Hungary's most crucial defensive barriers, while providing Ottoman forces with secure operational bases for further expansion into Hungarian heartlands. Archaeological evidence from the battlefield tells a story of technological superiority that determined the engagement's outcome. Extensive firearm usage by Ottoman forces, including early muskets and artillery pieces, gave them decisive advantages over Croatian forces equipped primarily with traditional medieval weapons. The physical remains reveal how completely military technology had evolved beyond the capabilities of kingdoms that had failed to modernize their defensive systems. Social tensions erupted throughout both kingdoms as economic pressures and military requirements generated unprecedented burdens on civilian populations. The Bohemian peasantry, which had gained certain rights during the Hussite period, faced systematic efforts to reduce their legal status while increasing their labor obligations to noble landlords. These pressures generated sporadic rebellions throughout Bohemian territories as peasant bands attacked noble estates and destroyed feudal records imposed during the post-war settlement. The Slovak peasant revolt of 1514, led by Georgi Dossa, represented the most serious challenge to noble authority during this period. What began as a crusading expedition against Ottoman forces transformed into a comprehensive assault on noble privileges and feudal obligations. Dossa's forces captured numerous noble strongholds while implementing radical social reforms that eliminated feudal distinctions and redistributed noble properties among peasant supporters. The revolt's initial success demonstrated both popular discontent with existing arrangements and organized peasant forces' military potential when properly motivated and led. The brutal suppression of Dosa's revolt required extensive military operations that revealed noble determination to preserve their privileges while exposing their dependence on royal authority for protection against popular uprisings. Combined Hungarian and Croatian noble forces, supported by professional soldiers, funded through emergency taxation, eventually defeated the peasant armies through superior equipment and coordination. The savage repression that followed included mass executions and harsh legal codes that further restricted peasant rights while strengthening noble control over rural populations. Constitutional changes implemented after the revolt's collapse reflected noble determination to prevent future challenges while reducing royal power that might support popular movements. The Tripartitum Legal Code of 1514 systematically codified noble privileges while reducing peasant rights to levels approaching serfdom in many regions. These legal changes strengthened noble control over agricultural production while reducing the tax base available for royal revenues, creating fiscal constraints that would plague subsequent rulers throughout the early 16th century. Despite frantic last-minute preparations, these desperate measures arrived far too late to remedy the catastrophic flaws embedded within Hungarian military structures. Political infighting had sabotaged every attempt at implementing coherent defensive strategies, leaving the kingdom exposed when its greatest test arrived. The marriage alliance forged in 1515 between Louis II and Mary of Austria represented the Hungarian Diet's calculated gambit to secure Habsburg military assistance while preserving their independence under Jagiellonian sovereignty. This diplomatic masterstroke theoretically opened access to imperial military resources that could match Ottoman capabilities. The reciprocal union between Archduke Ferdinand and Louis's sister Anna wove dynastic threads that would prove decisive following the young king's tragic fate. These intricate arrangements demonstrated remarkable sophistication in European diplomatic maneuvering while acknowledging Hungarian leadership's painful recognition that they could never withstand Ottoman expansion through their own strength alone. The alliances represented both political genius and admission of fundamental weakness that would soon prove prophetic. Suleiman's final campaign represented his methodical determination to obliterate Hungarian independence, while establishing Ottoman dominance over Central European territories that had remained beyond Islamic influence for centuries. The massive army assembled for this decisive operation included approximately 100,000 troops, supported by artillery capabilities and logistical systems that enabled sustained operations across vast territorial expanses. This formidable force combined elite Janissary units with provincial cavalry formations and specialized siege specialists, capable of reducing any fortification that dared resist their inexorable advance. Hungary's response revealed both the kingdom's tragic limitations and the extraordinary bravery of nobles who chose resistance. Despite facing insurmountable odds, Louis managed to assemble roughly 25,000 troops for the climactic confrontation, drawing contingents from throughout his realm plus small numbers of foreign volunteers who answered appeals for Christian solidarity against Islamic expansion. This force represented everything the kingdom could muster, yet remained pathetically inadequate against the Ottoman juggernaut approaching their borders. The Hungarian army's structure reflected traditional medieval military organization, with heavy cavalry forming their battle line's backbone, supported by infantry units, lacking the training and equipment necessary for effective resistance against Ottoman forces. Employing contemporary warfare techniques, these brave warriors would fight with desperate courage while possessing weapons and tactics better suited to conflicts from previous centuries, rather than the brutal realities of early modern combat. The Battle of Mohacs on August 29, 1526, stands among Central European history's most decisive military encounters as Ottoman forces systematically annihilated Hungarian military capabilities while eliminating the kingdom's entire political leadership structure. Combat began with Hungarian cavalry charges against Ottoman positions that achieved brief initial success before encountering disciplined Janissary formations supported by artillery that proved devastatingly effective against armored knights charging across open terrain. Hungarian forces fought with desperate valor while sustaining enormous casualties without achieving any significant tactical objectives that might have altered the engagement's predetermined outcome. Their medieval tactics proved utterly obsolete against Ottoman military innovations that combined disciplined infantry, superior artillery, and tactical flexibility that medieval heavy cavalry could not counter effectively. Louis VI's death during the battle's final stages eliminated the last Jagiellonian ruler while creating succession circumstances that would bring Habsburg authority to both Bohemia and Hungary. The young monarch's body, discovered in marshland where he had apparently drowned while attempting to flee the battlefield, bore wounds indicating his personal participation in the cavalry melees that characterized combat's concluding phase. His demise symbolized both Hungarian independence's end and the collapse of political arrangements that had governed Central Europe since the late 15th century. Mahacs's immediate aftermath witnessed rapid disintegration of Hungarian political structures as surviving nobles fled to secure territories, while Ottoman forces systematically occupied strategic positions throughout the former kingdom. The Hungarian Diet, reduced to a handful of survivors, confronted the impossible choice between acknowledging Ottoman suzerainty or seeking Habsburg protection that would terminate Hungarian independence under different circumstances entirely. The political vacuum created by military catastrophe enabled competing claimants to assert authority over different regions, while Ottoman forces consolidated control over territories that had resisted Islamic expansion for centuries. This fragmentation ensured that no coordinated resistance could emerge from Hungarian remnants, guaranteeing Ottoman dominance over their newly conquered territories. The Bohemian Diet's decision to elect Ferdinand of Austria as their monarch represented both recognition of Habsburg military capabilities and acceptance of political realities created by Ottoman expansion throughout Central Europe. Ferdinand's candidacy offered prospects of imperial military support against potential Ottoman expansion into Bohemian territories, while his marriage to Louis II's sister provided dynastic legitimacy for Habsburg claims that satisfied constitutional requirements for legitimate succession. The electoral agreement established constitutional limitations on royal authority similar to those characterizing Jagiellonian rule, ensuring continued noble dominance over Bohemian political structures, while providing Habsburg rulers access to the kingdom's resources and strategic position within Central Europe's evolving power balance. These arrangements satisfied immediate needs while creating frameworks for future conflicts over constitutional authority. Ferdinand's coronation as Bohemian king in Prague Castle on February 24, 1527, marked Habsburg rule's beginning that would fundamentally transform the kingdom's political, religious, and cultural landscape throughout the subsequent century. The ceremony reflected delicate balance between Habsburg dynastic ambitions and Bohemian constitutional traditions, as Ferdinand accepted the crown under conditions negotiated with the Diet that preserved noble privileges while acknowledging his hereditary monarchical authority. The coronation regalia, including the crown of Saint Wenceslas, with its distinctive floral design and precious stone inlays, symbolized continuity with Bohemian royal traditions, even as political power shifted decisively toward Vienna and the broader Habsburg imperial system. These symbolic elements maintained connections to pre-Habsburg traditions, while acknowledging fundamental changes in the kingdom's political orientation. Constitutional arrangements accompanying Ferdinand's accession established frameworks for Habsburg-Bohemian relations that would persist throughout the 16th century, while creating inherent tensions between royal prerogatives and noble autonomy. The Bohemian Diet retained control over taxation and military levies, requiring royal negotiation for revenue collection, while maintaining rights to approve or reject proposed legislation affecting the kingdom's governance. These limitations on royal authority reflected nobles' determination to preserve political gains achieved during the Jagiellonian period, while recognizing their need for Habsburg military protection against potential Ottoman expansion. Archaeological evidence from noble estates throughout Bohemia reveals extensive fortification improvements undertaken during this transitional period, suggesting continued concerns about territorial security despite Habsburg guarantees of protection. Ferdinand's early administrative reforms demonstrated his understanding of the need to balance imperial integration with respect for Bohemian institutional traditions. He retained existing governmental structures while introducing Habsburg administrative practices that enhanced bureaucratic efficiency and improved coordination between Bohemian and Austrian territories. The establishment of new record-keeping systems enabled more systematic tax collection and military organization while preserving legal frameworks governing noble privileges and municipal autonomy. These changes created hybrid governmental structures, combining Habsburg centralization with Bohemian particularism in ways that satisfied immediate political needs while establishing precedents for future constitutional conflicts. The delicate balance achieved during Ferdinand's early reign would face increasing pressures as Habsburg imperial obligations expanded and religious divisions intensified throughout Central Europe. Ferdinand's military transformation initiatives following the Ottoman menace demonstrated his unwavering commitment to revolutionizing Bohemian defensive systems while seamlessly incorporating kingdom forces into the vast imperial military apparatus. Revolutionary fortification blueprints embraced cutting-edge developments in artillery-resistant architecture, featuring star-shaped bastions and geometric defensive networks capable of withstanding bombardment from contemporary siege weaponry. These massive construction projects demanded enormous financial commitments and specialized technical knowledge, necessitating recruitment of Italian military engineers who had honed their expertise during the brutal Italian campaigns. Archaeological investigations at locations including Terezin and additional border strongholds unveil the remarkable engineering sophistication characterizing these defensive enhancements, encompassing underground tunnel systems, specialized artillery emplacements, and advanced water management networks enabling extended siege endurance. These innovations represented quantum leaps in defensive technology that would influence fortress design throughout Central Europe for generations. The proliferation of firearms manufacturing within Bohemian territories reflected both urgent military requirements and promising economic prospects as demand for advanced weaponry surged throughout Central Europe. Bohemian armament workshops cultivated expertise in producing muskets, pistols, and artillery pieces that merged German methodological approaches with innovations developed through hands-on military experience. The kingdom's abundant iron ore reserves supplied raw materials for weapons production, while skilled craftsmen trained in German and Italian workshops established manufacturing hubs in Prague and additional major urban centers. These developments generated fresh revenue streams for royal treasuries, while providing employment opportunities for urban populations that had endured hardship during previous periods of political upheaval. The transformation of Bohemia into a significant arms producer enhanced its strategic value within the Habsburg system, while creating technological capabilities that would serve multiple purposes beyond military applications. Ferdinand's passing in 1564 elevated his son Maximilian II to the Bohemian throne during an era of comparative stability that enabled the new monarch to pursue more ambitious policies concerning religious accommodation and cultural advancement. Maximilian's education had immersed him in humanist scholarship and Renaissance artistic traditions that profoundly influenced his governance approach. His personal religious convictions, which some contemporaries suspected included Protestant sympathies, enabled him to navigate denominational conflicts with greater flexibility than his strictly Catholic father had demonstrated. The new monarch's court in Prague magnetized scholars, artists, and musicians from across Europe, while his patronage of architectural ventures enhanced the city's reputation as a major cultural epicenter. The sophisticated religious policies Maximilian developed during the 1560s and 1570s represented an intricate attempt to balance Counter-Reformation objectives with practical acknowledgement of Protestant strength within Bohemian territories. Rather than pursuing systematic persecution of Protestant communities, Maximilian embraced policies of selective tolerance that maintained Catholic institutional authority while permitting Protestant worship under regulated conditions. These arrangements satisfied moderate Protestant nobles seeking religious security rather than political confrontation, while enabling Catholic authorities to claim progress toward denominational unity without provoking armed resistance that more aggressive policies might have generated. Archaeological evidence from rural parishes throughout Bohemia reveals construction of new churches during this period that incorporated architectural features suitable for both Catholic and Protestant liturgical practices, suggesting practical accommodation at local levels despite ongoing theological disagreements. This physical evidence demonstrates how religious compromise manifested in tangible ways that affected daily worship experiences for ordinary believers. The Bohemian Confession of 1575 represented the culmination of Protestant efforts to secure formal recognition of their religious rights, while demonstrating sophisticated theological scholarship that had developed within Reformed communities since the early 16th century. The Confession's authors, led by prominent nobles including Václav Budovec of Budoveš, and other educated Protestant leaders, created a comprehensive statement of faith that combined Lutheran doctrinal positions with elements derived from Hussite traditions and Calvinist theological innovations. The document's careful theological argumentation reflected its author's understanding of the need to present Protestant positions in ways that would satisfy imperial scrutiny while maintaining distinctive characteristics that differentiated Bohemian Protestantism from German Lutheran orthodoxy. This theological sophistication demonstrated the intellectual maturity Protestant communities had achieved through decades of scholarly development. Maximilian's acceptance of the Bohemian Confession marked a significant departure from previous Habsburg religious policies, while establishing precedents for denominational coexistence that would influence Central European development for decades. The monarch's formal recognition of Protestant rights included guarantees of religious worship, educational autonomy, and legal protection that provided security for Reformed communities, while establishing clear boundaries for their activities. These arrangements created complex religious settlements that satisfied immediate political needs while generating ongoing tensions between Catholic restoration efforts and Protestant institutional development. Implementation of these agreements required careful attention to local circumstances throughout Bohemian territories, with different regions developing varying approaches to denominational coexistence based on their specific demographic and political conditions. The cultural flowering characterizing Maximilian's reign reflected both resources made available through economic development and international connections that Habsburg rule had established with artistic centers throughout Europe. Prague Castle underwent extensive renovation projects that incorporated Renaissance architectural elements while preserving Gothic structural features connecting the complex with Bohemian historical traditions. The castle's new residential quarters included elaborate decorative programs combining Italian artistic techniques with local craftsmanship traditions, creating distinctive architectural styles that influenced building projects throughout Central Europe. The expansion of the castle's gardens employed advanced horticultural techniques borrowed from Italian Renaissance villa designs, while incorporating plant species from throughout the Habsburg domains that demonstrated the dynasty's global reach. Educational institution establishment during this period reflected Maximilian's commitment to intellectual development, while serving practical needs for trained administrators and clergy capable of managing the kingdom's complex religious and political arrangements. Prague University's curriculum expansion included new faculties, offering instruction in mathematics, natural philosophy, and modern languages that prepared students for careers in governmental service or commercial activities. The university's library received substantial additions through royal patronage and private donations, acquiring manuscripts and printed books that enhanced its reputation as a major center of scholarly research. Archaeological investigations of university buildings from this period reveal extensive construction projects that provided adequate facilities for expanded educational activities while incorporating architectural innovations reflecting contemporary academic developments. Rudolf II's succession in 1576 initiated the most remarkable period of cultural and intellectual achievement in Bohemian history. While establishing Prague as one of Europe's most important centers of Renaissance learning and artistic patronage, Rudolf's decision to transfer the imperial capital from Vienna to Prague reflected both his personal preferences for the city's cultural atmosphere and strategic calculations regarding advantages of governing the empire from a more central location. The transfer required massive expansion of governmental facilities and residential accommodations that transformed Prague's urban landscape, while attracting thousands of courtiers, administrators, artists, and scholars who contributed to the city's cosmopolitan character. Rudolf's court became renowned throughout Europe for its patronage of scientific research, artistic innovation, and intellectual inquiry that attracted leading figures from diverse fields of learning. The emperor's personal interests in astronomy, alchemy, and natural philosophy created an environment where experimental investigation flourished alongside traditional scholarly pursuits. Tycho Brahe's arrival in Prague in 1599 established the city as a major center of astronomical research, with his observations from the Imperial Observatory contributing fundamental data that would later support Johannes Kepler's revolutionary theories of planetary motion. The observatory's sophisticated instruments, including large brass quadrants and celestial globes, represented the most advanced scientific equipment available in contemporary Europe. Their precise construction demonstrated the high level of craftsmanship that imperial patronage had fostered, while their scientific applications contributed to astronomical discoveries that would reshape human understanding of the cosmos. The imperial collections Rudolf assembled during his reign created one of Europe's most remarkable concentrations of artistic and scientific objects, while demonstrating the global reach of Habsburg commercial and diplomatic networks. The Kunstkammer housed paintings by leading contemporary artists, including Giuseppe Arcimboldo, whose composite portraits combine naturalistic detail with symbolic complexity that appealed to Rudolf's intellectual interests. Despite this cultural magnificence, religious tensions developing during Rudolf's later reign reflected both his personal withdrawal from active governance and growing polarization between Catholic and Protestant factions throughout the Habsburg domains. The emperor's increasing reclusiveness and apparent mental instability created opportunities for competing religious and political factions to assert greater influence over imperial policy, while reducing the careful balance that had characterized previous decades. These mounting tensions spawned relentless conflicts over ecclesiastical appointments, educational policies, and legal jurisdictions that would eventually contribute to the catastrophic crisis erupting after Rudolf's demise. The intricate web of denominational disputes had grown beyond simple theological disagreements into fundamental questions about political authority and cultural identity that threatened the delicate balance maintaining Bohemian stability. Rudolf's Letter of Majesty, issued in 1609, represented his final desperate attempt to resolve religious conflicts through comprehensive guarantees of Protestant rights while maintaining imperial authority over Bohemian territories. This groundbreaking document confirmed Protestant nobles' rights to construct churches, appoint clergy, and educate their children according to Reformed theological principles, while establishing procedures for resolving denominational disputes arising in mixed communities. These revolutionary provisions satisfied immediate Protestant demands while creating institutional frameworks that theoretically could accommodate continued denominational diversity within a unified political system. However, the letter's implementation required sustained imperial support that became increasingly uncertain as Rudolf's mental condition deteriorated and succession disputes intensified throughout the Habsburg domains. The emperor's growing inability to maintain consistent policies created opportunities for competing factions to pursue conflicting agendas that undermined the careful compromises he had attempted to establish. The Donauwörth incident of 1607 demonstrated broader imperial tensions that would ultimately undermine the religious settlements Rudolf had attempted to establish within Bohemian territories. The suppression of Protestant rights in this Bavarian city by Catholic authorities, supported by imperial forces, revealed the fragility of denominational compromises when confronted with determined opposition from Counter-Reformation advocates. Protestant princes throughout the empire interpreted the incident as evidence of systematic Catholic efforts to eliminate Reformed communities despite existing legal guarantees, leading to defensive alliance formation that would contribute to the polarization characterizing early 17th century German politics. The Protestant Union's formation in 1608 and the Catholic League's establishment in 1609 created competing alliance systems that transformed local religious disputes into potential catalysts for empire-wide conflicts, while placing Bohemian Protestants in increasingly precarious positions. The Protestant Union's membership included several important German princes possessing sufficient military resources to resist Catholic expansion, while the Catholic League's formation under Bavarian leadership provided institutional frameworks for coordinated counter-Reformation policies. These developments created external pressures, influencing Bohemian denominational conflicts, while providing both Protestant and Catholic factions with potential sources of military support for future confrontations. The transformation of religious disputes into broader political conflicts meant that local issues would inevitably become entangled with imperial power struggles that transcended Bohemian territorial boundaries. Rudolf's death in January 1612 elevated his brother Matthias to the imperial throne during a period of unprecedented religious and political tension throughout the Habsburg domains. Matthias had already assumed control over Hungarian and Austrian territories through agreements negotiated during Rudolf's final years, creating circumstances where his succession to Bohemian royal authority represented consolidation of Habsburg power rather than new dynastic arrangements. However, the new emperor's advanced age and lack of direct heirs created immediate concerns about future succession that would influence political calculations throughout his brief reign. The Bohemian Diet's acceptance of Matthias reflected both constitutional precedent regarding Habsburg hereditary rights and practical recognition of military realities that made resistance to imperial authority extremely dangerous. The religious policies Matthias implemented during his reign reflected both his personal Catholic convictions and practical recognition of the need to maintain stability within territories containing substantial Protestant populations. His confirmation of the Letter of Majesty satisfied immediate Protestant demands, while his appointment of Catholic officials to key administrative positions demonstrated his commitment to gradual counter-Reformation objectives. These contradictory policies created ongoing tensions between official religious tolerance and practical discrimination that would contribute to the crisis erupting following his death. Archaeological evidence from Protestant churches throughout Bohemia reveals modifications made during this period, suggesting concerns about potential Catholic interference with Reformed worship practices, including construction of concealed meeting spaces and removal of decorative elements that might attract unwanted attention. These physical changes demonstrate how religious anxieties manifested in tangible preparations for potential persecution. The succession arrangements Matthias negotiated during his final years established his cousin Ferdinand of Styria as heir to Habsburg territories while creating circumstances that would test constitutional frameworks governing Bohemian politics since the early 16th century. Ferdinand's reputation as a committed counter-Reformation advocate generated immediate concerns among Protestant nobles who feared systematic persecution of Reformed communities under his rule. The Bohemian Diet's reluctant acceptance of Ferdinand's succession reflected both constitutional precedent and recognition of their limited ability to resist Habsburg dynastic claims without external military support that was unlikely to materialize given the complex international circumstances characterizing early 17th century European politics. Growing tensions during Matthias's final years reflected both specific concerns about Ferdinand's succession and broader anxieties regarding Protestant communities' future throughout Central Europe. Catholic victories in the Jülich-Kliv succession dispute and other contemporary conflicts demonstrated counter-Reformation military strategies' effectiveness, while revealing Protestant weaknesses in coordinating defensive efforts against systematic Catholic expansion. These developments created psychological pressures within Bohemian Protestant communities that contributed to radicalization, ultimately leading to open rebellion against Habsburg authority. The construction of new fortifications at Protestant noble estates throughout Bohemia during this period suggests preparation for potential military resistance, despite enormous risks associated with confronting imperial power. Matthias's death on March 20th, 1619, created the succession crisis that would transform local Bohemian religious and constitutional disputes into the catalyst for European history's most devastating conflict. Ferdinand II's accession to imperial authority coincided with his assumption of Bohemian royal titles, creating circumstances where opposition to his rule would constitute rebellion against both kingdom and empire. The new emperor's immediate implementation of counter-Reformation policies, including appointment of Catholic officials to positions previously held by Protestants and restrictions on Reformed educational activities, confirmed Protestant fears regarding his intentions while providing justification for resistance, developing throughout the previous decade. The Second Defenestration of Prague on May 23, 1618, represented the culmination of mounting tensions between Protestant nobles and imperial authorities, while establishing violent precedents that would characterize the subsequent conflict. The incident began as a confrontation between Protestant representatives and imperial governors regarding implementation of religious policies that Protestants considered violations of the Letter of Majesty's guarantees. When negotiations failed to resolve these disputes, Protestant leaders, including Count Thurn, physically expelled imperial governors Martinitz and Slavata from windows of Prague Castle's council chamber, recreating the dramatic gesture that had initiated the Hussite Revolution 2 centuries earlier. The governors' survival, after their fall into the castle moat's refuse heap, was attributed by Catholics to miraculous intervention, while Protestants claimed their thick coats had cushioned their landing, creating competing narratives reflecting deeper ideological divisions separating opposing factions. The defenestration's immediate aftermath witnessed rapid collapse of imperial authority throughout Bohemian territories, as Protestant nobles assumed control of governmental institutions while beginning military preparations for conflict. They recognized was now inevitable. The formation of a provisional government under Protestant leadership eliminated Habsburg administrative authority, while establishing new constitutional arrangements that theoretically restored the elective monarchy, characterizing pre-Habsburg Bohemian politics. These changes required extensive reorganization of governmental structures and military forces, while creating diplomatic opportunities for alliances with other European powers opposing Habsburg hegemony. The speed and effectiveness of these organizational efforts demonstrated sophisticated planning preceding the defenestration, while revealing the extent of Protestant preparation for armed resistance against imperial authority. The Protestant rebellion erupting following the Second Defenestration created unprecedented opportunities for Ferdinand to reshape Bohemian political and religious structures, according to counter-Reformation principles, while eliminating constitutional limitations that had constrained Habsburg authority for nearly a century. The emperor's systematic response combined diplomatic isolation of Protestant forces with military preparations, enabling decisive intervention once international circumstances permitted effective action. Ferdinand's negotiations with Catholic allies throughout Europe, including Pope Paul V, Philip III of Spain, and Maximilian of Bavaria, created financial and military resources far exceeding anything Bohemian Protestant rebels could mobilize through their limited alliance networks with German Protestant princes and potential Ottoman support. The rebels' initial military endeavors concentrated on securing control of strategic fortifications throughout Bohemian territories, while attempting to forge alliance relationships with Protestant powers capable of providing external support necessary for sustained resistance against Habsburg military supremacy. These early efforts revealed both the scope of Protestant ambitions and the fundamental challenges they faced in transforming political rebellion into effective military opposition against one of Europe's most powerful dynasties. Christian of Anhalt's appointment as commander of Protestant forces represented the rebels' desperate attempt to acquire professional military leadership, while his previous experience in Dutch service against Spanish forces provided valuable knowledge of contemporary military techniques and organizational methods. His reputation as a competent military professional offered hope that Protestant forces could achieve tactical effectiveness despite their material disadvantages. However, Christian's forces remained fundamentally inferior to imperial armies in terms of equipment, training, and logistical support, while his strategic position required defensive operations that negated many advantages Protestant forces might have possessed through superior knowledge of local terrain and population support. The Protestant army assembling during the summer of 1620 included approximately 21,000 troops drawn from Bohemian levies, German Protestant auxiliaries, and Hungarian allies, whose military effectiveness varied considerably based on their previous combat experience and equipment quality. This diverse coalition reflected the international character of Protestant resistance, while highlighting the coordination challenges that would plague their military operations throughout the campaign. The campaign, culminating in the Battle of White Mountain, began with imperial forces crossing into Bohemian territory in September 1620. Employing systematic advance procedures that secured their supply lines while preventing Protestant forces from conducting effective harassment operations against their columns. The Imperial Army's movement toward Prague demonstrated sophisticated understanding of strategic requirements for successful siege operations against a major fortified city, including establishment of secure bases for artillery positions and coordination of multiple approach routes, enabling encirclement of defensive positions. Archaeological evidence from the campaign route reveals extensive proof of imperial military organization, including standardized camp layouts, defensive earthworks, and supply depot locations reflecting advanced logistical planning that had been perfected through decades of Habsburg warfare against Ottoman forces and rebellious subjects throughout their diverse territories. The Protestant decision to meet imperial forces in open battle, rather than conducting siege defense of Prague, reflected both strategic calculations regarding their inability to withstand extended siege operations and political pressures from nobles demanding active resistance rather than passive defense. This choice would prove catastrophic, as it played directly into imperial strengths while abandoning defensive advantages that might have prolonged resistance. The Protestant army's deployment on White Mountain, a low ridge west of Prague, provided defensive advantages including elevated positions for artillery placement and clear fields of fire against advancing enemy formations. However, the position also created tactical limitations by preventing effective retreat if the battle developed unfavorably, while exposing Protestant forces to potential flanking maneuvers, exploiting the relatively open terrain surrounding their defensive positions. The Battle of White Mountain on November 8, 1620, began with artillery exchanges demonstrating the superior quality and quantity of imperial cannon compared to Protestant ordnance, with Catholic gunners achieving more accurate fire that disrupted enemy formations, while maintaining better protection for their own equipment and personnel. The imperial artillery bombardment included both direct fire against Protestant infantry positions and indirect fire targeting command posts and supply areas behind enemy lines. Archaeological investigations at the battlefield have revealed numerous cannonballs and artillery fragments, indicating the bombardment's intensity, with iron projectiles ranging from small anti-personnel rounds to large siege gun ammunition designed to breach fortified positions. These physical remains tell the story of technological superiority that would determine the engagement's outcome before infantry combat even began. The infantry assault following artillery preparation showcased Imperial forces' tactical superiority while revealing fundamental weaknesses in Protestant military organization that had developed during their brief period of independence. The Catholic advance employed coordinated formations combining pike squares with musketeer units in ways that maximized firepower while maintaining defensive capabilities against cavalry charges. The Spanish tercio veterans forming the core of Imperial infantry demonstrated the discipline and tactical flexibility that had made them Europe's most feared soldiers, advancing steadily despite Protestant resistance, while maintaining formation integrity, enabling effective mutual support between different units. Their professional competence contrasted sharply with the amateur status of most Protestant forces. Protestant resistance during the battle's initial phases demonstrated considerable individual courage, while revealing organizational problems preventing effective coordination between different elements of their army. Protestant infantry units fought tenaciously from their defensive positions, inflicting significant casualties on advancing imperial forces through effective use of firearms and artillery. However, the lack of experienced officers capable of coordinating tactical responses to changing battlefield conditions prevented Protestant forces from exploiting opportunities that might have altered the battle's outcome. The absence of adequate reserves that could reinforce threatened positions or exploit tactical successes created circumstances where initial defensive advantages were gradually eroded through sustained imperial pressure. This fundamental flaw in Protestant military organization would prove decisive in determining the battle's ultimate outcome. The cavalry engagement developing on the battle's northern flank proved decisive in determining the overall outcome, as Imperial horsemen successfully outflanked Protestant positions while preventing effective withdrawal of defeated infantry units. The Catholic cavalry included both German heavy cavalry equipped with armor and firearms and Croatian light cavalry whose mobility and harassment tactics proved particularly effective against disorganized enemy formations. The collapse of Protestant cavalry resistance eliminated their ability to protect infantry flanks, while creating panic that spread throughout their entire army as soldiers recognized that organized retreat had become impossible. The psychological impact of cavalry defeat often proved more devastating than actual casualties, as troops lost confidence in their commander's ability to protect them from enemy attacks. The rout following the collapse of Protestant defensive positions demonstrated both the completeness of imperial victory and the devastating consequences awaiting defeated rebel forces. Protestant soldiers fled toward Prague in complete disorder, abandoning equipment and supplies, while imperial cavalry pursued them with systematic efficiency that maximized casualties among the defeated enemy. The pursuit continued for several miles, with imperial forces capturing or killing thousands of Protestant troops who had thrown away weapons and equipment in their desperate attempts to escape. Archaeological evidence along the retreat route includes discarded military equipment, personal possessions, and human remains, indicating the scale of disaster that befell Protestant forces. White Mountain's immediate aftermath witnessed systematic elimination of Protestant political leadership through executions, demonstrating Ferdinand's determination to prevent future rebellions, while establishing Habsburg authority on foundations that could not be challenged by constitutional opposition. Imperial commissioners assuming control of Prague began immediate investigations to identify rebel leaders and their supporters, employing interrogation techniques and documentary evidence to compile comprehensive lists of individuals who had participated in or supported the Protestant rebellion. These investigations revealed extensive networks of noble families, urban leaders, and ecclesiastical figures who had contributed to the revolt while providing legal justification for the massive confiscations and executions that would follow. The thoroughness of these inquiries demonstrated Habsburg determination to eliminate not just military resistance but the entire social and political infrastructure supporting Protestant opposition. The public executions carried out in Prague's Old Town Square on June 21, 1621, represented one of Central European history's most dramatic demonstrations of royal justice, while establishing precedents for absolute monarchy that would characterize Habsburg rule for the next century. 27 prominent Protestant leaders, including nobles, university professors, and urban patricians, were beheaded or hanged before crowds compelled to witness the consequences of rebellion against imperial authority. The execution site was carefully chosen for maximum symbolic impact, with scaffolds erected in the kingdom's most important public space where royal proclamations had traditionally been announced and where the community's collective identity was most strongly expressed. This deliberate staging transformed public execution into political theatre designed to demonstrate the futility of resistance against Habsburg power. Count Joachim Andreas Schlick, who had served as one of the rebellion's military commanders, faced execution with dignity that impressed even Catholic observers, while his final speech emphasized his continued commitment to Protestant theological principles despite his political defeat. His death eliminated one of the few Protestant commanders possessing the professional competence necessary for effective organization of rebel military forces, ensuring that future resistance would lack experienced leadership. Physical evidence scattered across former noble estates throughout Bohemia unveils massive construction campaigns undertaken by new proprietors who desperately sought to showcase their elevated social positions, while retrofitting properties to match contemporary architectural standards, reflecting their cultural heritage and artistic tastes. These ambitious building projects represented more than mere vanity. They constituted deliberate statements about the fundamental transformation of Bohemian society under Habsburg dominance. The Jesuit educational revolution accompanying this political upheaval embodied Ferdinand's methodical campaign to establish fresh intellectual foundations for Catholic supremacy, while obliterating Protestant scholarly traditions that had thrived at Prague University and other learning centers across Bohemian lands. The Society of Jesus obtained sweeping privileges and generous financial backing, enabling them to create schools throughout the realm, while seizing control of university instruction that would mold future generations of Bohemian intellectual and political leadership. Jesuit curricula stressed classical tongues, Catholic doctrine, and scholastic philosophy, while banishing humanist educational methods that had distinguished Protestant academic establishments. The magnificent Clementianum complex in Prague emerged as the epicenter of Jesuit scholarly pursuits, its vast library and astronomical observatory, showcasing the intellectual excellence Catholic educational institutions could attain through sufficient financial resources and international academic networks. Jesuit instructors staffing these institutions comprise scholars educated at premier Catholic universities across Europe, importing cutting-edge knowledge of contemporary intellectual advances while maintaining unwavering commitment to Counter-Reformation theological doctrines. Physical investigations of Jesuit structures throughout Bohemia expose the enormous construction undertakings accompanying their educational expansion, encompassing specialized facilities for scientific teaching, manuscript storage, and living quarters for international professors and pupils. Linguistic regulations enacted during Habsburg absolutism's early decades embodied systematic campaigns to diminish Czech cultural independence while advancing German administrative and cultural supremacy across Bohemian territories. Imperial edicts established German as the principal tongue for governmental functions, judicial processes, and commercial dealings, while limiting Czech usage to casual conversations and religious ceremonies for rural communities. These measures created tangible benefits for German-speaking officials and traders, while systematically handicapping Czech speakers pursuing advancement in governmental, commercial, or clerical professions. The harsh reality meant that ambitious Czechs faced impossible choices between cultural identity and professional success. Implementation of the Rabota system represented Ferdinand's solution to workforce shortages created by population losses during the uprising and subsequent exodus of Protestant families to territories offering religious freedom. The innovative arrangement demanded peasants provide predetermined amounts of unpaid labor to aristocratic landowners while restricting their movement freedom and economic pursuits in ways approaching serfdom across many regions. These arrangements supplied nobles with agricultural workforce necessary for estate operations, while guaranteeing social stability through legal constraints, preventing peasant mobility and political organization. Physical evidence from countryside settlements reveals construction of new manor houses and farm buildings reflecting increased noble dominance over rural populations, while demonstrating architectural preferences of new Catholic landowners. The Catholic architectural revolution characterizing the mid-17th century created distinctive Baroque landscapes across Bohemian territories, while showcasing the cultural aspirations of new religious and political authorities. Prague Castle's reconstruction incorporated Italian Baroque design features while maintaining Gothic structural elements, connecting the complex with Bohemian historical heritage. The castle's new ceremonial chambers included ornate decorative schemes, emphasizing Habsburg dynastic legitimacy, while religious artwork reinforced Catholic theological doctrines replacing Protestant alternatives. The magnitude and sophistication of these architectural ventures demanded substantial financial investment, while employing craftsmen from across Catholic Europe, who introduced innovative artistic methods and decorative customs. Parish church construction accompanying Catholic restoration created new religious environments throughout rural Bohemia, while providing architectural settings suitable for Counter-Reformation liturgical practices. These structures incorporated Baroque design features, including dramatic illumination effects, elaborate altar installations, and sophisticated sculptural schemes, emphasizing Catholic theological doctrines while creating emotionally compelling worship experiences. Church decorative schemes frequently included imagery specifically contradicting Protestant theological positions, while celebrating Catholic saints and religious practices eliminated during the Protestant era. Physical investigations of countryside churches expose extensive modifications made to existing structures, while new construction employed standardized design features reflecting centralized planning by ecclesiastical authorities. The gradual economic revival characterizing the later 17th century reflected both political stability, restoration, and Bohemian territories' integration into broader Habsburg commercial networks, providing access to markets throughout Central and Southern Europe. Development of new manufacturing sectors, including textile production and metalworking, created urban employment possibilities, while generating revenues supporting continued architectural and cultural ventures. Agricultural production expansion, on redistributed aristocratic estates employed enhanced farming methods, while market town growth provided commercial hubs, facilitating exchange between rural producers and urban consumers. These economic improvements demonstrated how political transformation could ultimately generate material prosperity despite its violent origins. Demographic shifts, accompanying political and religious transformation, included substantial population movements as Protestant families migrated to territories, offering religious tolerance while Catholic settlers arrived from other Habsburg domains and German territories. These migrations created new ethnic and religious compositions across many regions, while introducing different cultural customs and economic practices, influencing Bohemian development for centuries. Parish records throughout Bohemia document these population changes, while revealing gradual linguistic transition from Czech to German in many areas where new settlers established dominant cultural patterns. These demographic transformations represented perhaps the most lasting consequence of the White Mountain defeat. Emperor Charles VI's death on October 20th, 1740, triggered Habsburg history's most severe succession crisis, while creating unprecedented opportunities for European powers to challenge Austrian dominance in Central Europe. The pragmatic sanction that Charles had spent decades negotiating with European courts theoretically guaranteed his daughter Maria Theresa's inheritance of all Habsburg territories, including the Bohemian crown. However, the document's legal validity faced immediate challenges from multiple claimants possessing alternative dynastic justifications for their territorial ambitions. The carefully constructed diplomatic agreements suddenly seemed fragile when confronted with the realities of European power politics. Frederick II of Prussia emerged as the most immediate menace, launching his Silesian invasion in December 1740, with 27,000 troops, employing advanced military tactics and superior artillery to overwhelm Austrian defensive positions inadequately prepared for sustained warfare. Prussian occupation of Silesia demonstrated both Frederick's military reforms' effectiveness and fundamental weaknesses developing within Habsburg defensive capabilities during peaceful decades following Turkish conflicts. Prussian forces employed disciplined infantry formations, equipped with improved flintlock muskets and supported by mobile artillery units, rapidly concentrating firepower against specific targets. The Prussian army's organizational structure incorporated lessons learned from contemporary European conflicts, including standardized drill procedures, effective supply systems, and medical services maintaining unit strength during extended campaign operations. Physical evidence from Silesian battlefields reveals extensive use of iron cannonballs and musket ammunition, demonstrating industrial capabilities Frederick had developed supporting his military ambitions. These material remains tell stories of technological advancement transforming European warfare. The Battle of Mollwitz on April 10, 1741, provided Frederick his first major victory against Austrian forces, while revealing tactical innovations characterizing Prussian military success throughout subsequent conflicts. Prussian infantry's disciplined volleys proved devastatingly effective against Austrian cavalry charges, with coordinated musket fire creating killing zones traditional mounted tactics could not overcome. Austrian forces, commanded by Field Marshal Neperg, employed conventional military methods proven successful during previous conflicts, but inadequate against Prussian tactical innovations. The battle's outcome confirmed Prussian control over Lower Silesia, while demonstrating to other European powers that Austrian military weakness created opportunities for territorial gains, impossible during Charles VI's reign. Maria Theresa's response to the Silesian crisis revealed both her personal determination and institutional strengths, enabling Habsburg recovery despite initial military disasters. The young Archduchess, only 23 when inheriting the throne, possessed limited governmental experience, but demonstrated exceptional political instincts, enabling her to navigate complex diplomatic and military challenges threatening to dismember her inheritance. Nevertheless, the new emperor's constrained monetary resources and reliance on French military assistance created core vulnerabilities that Habsburg diplomacy would ultimately manipulate to reclaim their imperial standing. The Bohemian offensive accompanying the imperial election showcased both the persistent allegiance of Bohemian lands to Habsburg rule and the potency of defensive tactics that Maria Theresa's counselors had crafted to safeguard their essential territories. French and Bavarian armies invading Bohemia in 1741 initially secured remarkable achievements, seizing Prague in November and establishing provisional dominance over substantial portions of the kingdom. Nevertheless, their failure to sustain sufficient supply routes during winter campaigns created openings that Austrian armies exploited through methodical harassment of enemy communications and provision centers. Austria's recapture of Prague in December 1742 signaled a pivotal transformation in the conflict, while showcasing Habsburg authorities' endurance when facing existential dangers. The Austrian offensive against French and Bavarian strongholds utilized synchronized infantry and artillery strikes that capitalized on enemy vulnerabilities generated by prolonged siege warfare and insufficient winter preparations. Prague's liberation eliminated the gravest menace to Habsburg dominion over Bohemian lands, while furnishing Maria Theresa with fortified positions for sustained opposition against the European alliance formed against her inheritance. This strategic victory demonstrated how determined defense could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle in 1748 terminated the War of Austrian Succession, with territorial settlements, confirming both Habsburg endurance and the irreversible transfer of Silesia to Prussian authority. Maria Theresa's acknowledgement of Silesian forfeiture embodied pragmatic acceptance of military facts, while her preservation of all remaining inherited domains proved Habsburg resistance's effectiveness despite catastrophic initial setbacks. The Accords clauses concerning imperial succession reinstated Habsburg mastery over the Holy Roman Empire, while installing Francis Stephen of Lorraine, Maria Theresa's consort, as Emperor Francis I through agreements preserving Habsburg dynastic concerns within altered constitutional structures. This diplomatic achievement salvaged Habsburg prestige from potential ruin. Administrative transformations Maria Theresa enacted during the 1750s and 1760s embodied methodical campaigns to reinforce Habsburg governmental capacities, while confronting institutional deficiencies exposed during the succession conflict. New bureaucratic protocols established more efficient taxation systems, while uniform administrative practices eliminated regional disparities previously constraining governmental effectiveness. These innovations included professional civil service roles requiring educational credentials rather than aristocratic lineage, introducing merit-based promotion attracting competent administrators from varied social origins. The transformation represented a fundamental shift from feudal privilege toward rational governance based on demonstrated ability. Military reforms accompanying administrative modernization incorporated insights gained from Prussian tactical achievements, while addressing Austrian strategic needs differing from Prussian offensive requirements. New military academies provided professional instruction for officer aspirants, while uniform drill protocols enhanced unit coordination and battlefield performance. These improvements encompassed adopting superior firearms and artillery matching Prussian military technology, while organizational modifications strengthened logistical capacities proven insufficient during recent battles. The comprehensive approach demonstrated systematic learning from previous failures. Economic strategies Maria Theresa formulated during the 1750s revealed sophisticated comprehension of connections between commercial advancement and military strength, while addressing fiscal limitations restricting Habsburg responses to external dangers. Manufacturing industry encouragement through tax benefits and protective duties established domestic production capabilities, reducing foreign supplier dependence, while creating urban employment. Transportation infrastructure enhancement, encompassing road building and river navigation initiatives, promoted commercial growth while improving military movement crucial for territorial protection. These investments created foundations for sustained economic expansion, supporting long-term strategic objectives. Educational transformations, characterizing Maria Theresa's reign reflected Enlightenment influences and practical acknowledgement of educated populations' necessity for supporting contemporary governmental and military establishments. Mandatory primary schooling generated literacy standards, enabling more effective administrative communication, while establishing groundwork for advanced technical instruction, supporting manufacturing progress. Secondary education expansion featured new curricula, emphasizing practical disciplines, including mathematics, natural philosophy, and contemporary languages preparing students for governmental service or commercial pursuits. These educational investments represented long-term strategies for building human capital essential for modernization. Religious strategies. Maria Theresa maintained throughout her reign balanced personal Catholic dedication with practical awareness of accommodating religious minorities within her heterogeneous territories. Gradual relaxation on Protestant worship reflected Enlightenment influences and strategic assessments regarding religious tolerance benefits for commercial development and population retention. These policies generated fresh opportunities for religious minorities while preserving Catholic institutional supremacy, satisfying conservative factions within Habsburg domains. The careful balance demonstrated sophisticated political judgment, navigating competing pressures. Serfdom abolition. Maria Theresa, initiated during the 1770s, constituted one of Central European history's most significant social transformations, while addressing economic inefficiencies, limiting agricultural productivity throughout Habsburg territories. New legal frameworks granted peasants personal liberty and property rights, while establishing monetary rent payments replacing traditional labor duties. These modifications created agricultural improvement incentives, while producing increased tax income, supporting continued governmental modernization. Physical evidence from rural communities throughout Bohemia exposes extensive construction ventures undertaken by newly liberated peasants, investing enhanced earnings in improved dwellings and farming facilities. Joseph II's succession in 1780 elevated a ruler whose Enlightenment beliefs and reformist aspirations would revolutionize Habsburg territories through systematic implementation of rational governmental doctrines. Joseph's joint rule with his mother during the preceding 15 years had furnished extensive administrative experience, while his journeys throughout European intellectual hubs had exposed him to contemporary philosophical advances, influencing his governmental reform approach. The new emperor's personal commitment to Enlightenment doctrines created unprecedented possibilities for comprehensive social and political transformation, while his determination to implement reforms rapidly generated opposition from conservative elements preferring gradual modification. This tension would define his entire reign. The Edict of Tolerance Joseph proclaimed in 1781 represented contemporary European history's most comprehensive religious freedom guarantee, while removing legal restrictions previously constraining Protestant and Orthodox Christian communities throughout Habsburg territories. The edict granted religious minorities rights to construct churches, establish schools, and participate completely in commercial and professional pursuits, while maintaining Catholic institutional privileges where historical precedents existed. These provisions created new possibilities for religious minorities, while demonstrating Joseph's dedication to rational governmental doctrines, prioritizing administrative efficiency over traditional religious distinctions. The bold initiative challenged centuries of religious exclusion. Administrative reforms Joseph implemented during the 1780s established uniform governmental frameworks throughout Habsburg territories, while eliminating regional privileges previously complicating imperial administration. German's establishment as the exclusive administrative language simplified bureaucratic processes while creating career opportunities for educated individuals regardless of ethnic heritage. These linguistic policies provoked resistance from Hungarian and Czech aristocrats, viewing them as cultural autonomy threats, while practical implementation demanded extensive retraining of governmental personnel previously conducting business in local tongues. The reforms demonstrated both Enlightenment ideals and practical challenges of modernization. Judicial reforms accompanying administrative modernization instituted uniform legal codes throughout Habsburg territories, while eliminating torture and other brutal punishments. Enlightenment philosophers condemned as human dignity violations. New legal procedures emphasized evidence-based prosecution, while providing defendants with rights absent from traditional judicial systems. These reforms created more predictable legal environments, facilitating commercial development, while demonstrating Joseph's commitment to rational governmental principles, treating all subjects equally, regardless of social position. The transformation represented fundamental shifts toward modern legal concepts. Economic strategies Joseph pursued during the 1780s reflected physiocratic influences, emphasizing agricultural development while reducing traditional commercial activity restrictions. These policies demonstrated systematic application of Enlightenment economic theories to practical governance challenges. Internal trade obstacle removal promoted economic unification across Habsburg domains, while innovative taxation schemes based on property values rather than hereditary rank established more balanced revenue generation. These strategies produced enhanced governmental income while establishing motivations for agricultural enhancement that boosted food output throughout the monarchy. The systematic approach demonstrated how enlightened governance could generate practical benefits for both state and society. Opposition to Joseph's transformations emerging during the late 1780s embodied both particular complaints concerning specific measures and wider anxieties about governmental change's velocity and breadth. Hungarian aristocrats orchestrated systematic resistance against linguistic mandates and administrative alterations threatening their customary prerogatives, while Belgian regions exploded in uprising against religious measures restricting Catholic institutional power. These resistance campaigns revealed enlightened reforms' practical constraints when executed without sufficient consideration for local customs and concerns. The gap between rational theory and complex social realities created inevitable tensions that challenged reformist ambitions. The Czech national revival commencing during Joseph's rule embodied both reaction to his linguistic measures and broader cultural movements, fostering ethnic awareness throughout Central Europe. Czech scholars, including Josef Dobrovsky and Josef Jungmann, initiated systematic campaigns to preserve and advance Czech literary heritage while producing contemporary educational resources capable of competing with German cultural supremacy. These academic pursuits established groundwork for Czech cultural renaissance while showcasing unintended outcomes of Joseph's administrative standardization that had aimed to eliminate ethnic differences. The irony of uniform policies generating stronger ethnic consciousness would influence future political development significantly. Joseph II's demise in February 1790 elevated his brother Leopold II during unprecedented turmoil as revolutionary upheaval in France generated fresh ideological challenges, while internal opposition to Habsburg transformations threatened territorial fragmentation. Leopold's brief tenure concentrated on restoring stability through careful modification of Joseph's most contentious measures, while preserving essential administrative enhancements that had strengthened governmental effectiveness. The new emperor's diplomatic abilities enabled successful compromise negotiations with Hungarian and Belgian resistance movements, while his death in March 1792 prevented complete implementation of his stabilization initiatives. The brief interlude demonstrated both reform's necessity and the challenges of managing political transition. Francis II's succession in 1792 coincided with revolutionary conflict outbreak that would reshape European political relationships, while generating existential menaces to traditional monarchical power across the continent. The young emperor inherited territories destabilized by recent reform campaigns, while confronting military challenges from French revolutionary armies, employing innovative tactical approaches and ideological inspirations, differing fundamentally from conventional European warfare. Habsburg responses to these challenges demanded resource mobilization on unprecedented levels, while diplomatic initiatives sought to forge effective alliances against French expansion. The scale of transformation required went beyond anything previously attempted in European politics. French Revolutionary Wars dominating European affairs during the 1790s created repeated military emergencies, testing Habsburg defensive capacities while revealing both strengths and constraints of administrative reforms implemented during preceding decades. Austrian armies employed conventional military approaches, initially effective against revolutionary forces, but gradually lost potency as French troops developed innovative tactical methods, exploiting their revolutionary fervor. Military defeats Austrian forces endured during the 1790s exposed fundamental flaws in Habsburg military organization, while generating political pressures influencing subsequent governmental strategies. The learning curve proved steep and costly for traditional military establishments. The Treaty of Campo Formio in 1797 concluded revolutionary warfare's initial phase with territorial agreements, confirming Austrian forfeiture of Belgian lands while compensating Habsburg losses through Venetian territory acquisition, eliminated by French conquest. These territorial exchanges demonstrated both Habsburg diplomatic adaptability and broader European transformation, eliminating traditional political frameworks throughout the continent. The Accords clauses regarding imperial arrangements established precedents for constitutional modifications, ultimately leading to Holy Roman Empire dissolution. The ancient structure could no longer accommodate revolutionary-era realities. Warfare resumption in 1805, following Napoleon's imperial assumption, created fresh military challenges, testing Habsburg capabilities against contemporary European history's most sophisticated military organization. The Grand Armée Napoleon assembled for his Austrian campaign employed organizational innovations and tactical approaches developed through continuous warfare years, while French industrial capacities provided equipment advantages traditional Austrian manufacturing could not equal. The campaign culminating in Austerlitz battle demonstrated both Napoleon's tactical brilliance and traditional European military methods' fundamental obsolescence. When confronting revolutionary innovations, the transformation of warfare itself had rendered previous approaches dangerously outdated. The Battle of Austerlitz on December 2, 1805, represented European history's most decisive military encounters, while showcasing Napoleon's ability to coordinate complex tactical maneuvers, exploiting enemy vulnerabilities with devastating effectiveness. French victory eliminated the Third Coalition while forcing Austria to accept territorial forfeitures, including substantial Bohemian lands transferred to Napoleon's German confederates. The engagement's outcome confirmed French military dominance while creating political circumstances necessitating fundamental alterations in Central European political organization. The old order could no longer sustain itself against such overwhelming force. The Treaty of Pressburg, concluding the 1805 campaign, required Austrian acceptance of territorial losses, eliminating traditional Habsburg influence in southwestern German regions, while confirming Napoleon's dominant position within European political systems. The agreement's provisions concerning imperial arrangements created constitutional emergencies threatening Holy Roman Empire's continued existence. French pressure on German princes encouraged their withdrawal from traditional imperial duties, creating circumstances where imperial dissolution became unavoidable despite centuries of constitutional tradition connecting Central European territories through imperial authority. The ancient bonds were finally severing under modern pressures. Francis's Austrian Empire proclamation in August 1804 represented his attempt to preserve Habsburg imperial dignity, while adapting to evolving European circumstances, threatening traditional imperial frameworks. The new imperial designation provided constitutional structures accommodating Holy Roman imperial authority loss while maintaining Habsburg claims to imperial status within their hereditary domains. These arrangements established fresh relationships between Habsburg rulers and their subjects, while eliminating complex constitutional obligations characterizing Holy Roman imperial governance. The transition marked both ending and beginning. Holy Roman Empire dissolution on August 6, 1806, concluded over 8 centuries of imperial history, while marking medieval political structure's definitive termination that had governed Central European development since Charlemagne's coronation. Francis's Holy Roman Imperial title, abdication, reflected both French pressure and practical acknowledgement that the empire's constitutional foundations had suffered irreparable damage through revolutionary warfare and territorial modifications. Formal dissolution eliminated legal frameworks connecting diverse German territories while creating opportunities for innovative political arrangements, characterizing 19th-century European development. The medieval world had finally ended, replaced by something entirely new. The Kingdom of Bohemia's transformation into Austrian Empire, Crownland represented both constitutional change and practical continuity, as Habsburg administrative structures remained largely unchanged despite new imperial arrangements. Bohemian territories retained historical boundaries and traditional administrative institutions, while fresh imperial frameworks provided legal contexts accommodating Holy Roman constitutional obligation elimination. These modifications established new relationships between Bohemian institutions and imperial authority, while preserving cultural and administrative traditions developed through centuries of Habsburg rule. continuity within change characterized this transitional period. This transformative period's conclusion marked Bohemia's termination as an independent kingdom within Holy Roman Empire, while establishing new constitutional foundations governing its development throughout the modern era. Administrative, social, and cultural changes occurring during the 18th century created institutional frameworks influencing Bohemian development for generations. Traditional imperial structure elimination opened possibilities for new political organization forms characterizing subsequent European history, the kingdom emerging from Slavic tribal origins in the 6th century, achieving royal dignity under PME Slids, surviving Hussite period religious upheavals, and adapting to Habsburg rule had transformed into a modern European empire component. This transformation marked one historical era's end, while establishing foundations for challenges and opportunities, defining its future within the broader Austrian imperial system. The long journey from medieval kingdom to modern crown land represented both ending and beginning in the great sweep of European history.